In a beautiful school illuminated by the rays of the sun, someone can be seen telling their friend that the test took too long. Two students are talking, and one of them explained long time because their friend guessed all the questions on paper and then stared blankly at the sheet. Suddenly, some rumbles can be heard, and the two young people who were previously conversing turn their attention to something beside them. Several military cars and trucks begin to pass through the streets, and it's even possible to see students being taken by these vehicles. The young people being escorted by the military vehicles seem calm, just talking and having fun during the ride. The girls, upon seeing this, become extremely excited, as if they are admiring the boys in the vehicles. Seeing this, the black-haired boy who was previously talking says that those students are not real adventurers, but rather students from some specialized school. The logo on the vehicle is a sword embedded in a shield, and the black-haired student explains to his friend that the logo belongs to the warrior school. In the history of this world, the events that occurred in the past began without any prior warning. A completely burning and destroyed city can be seen. Several blue portals in the sky started to open, and various creatures emerged from them, taking over the city and leaving people desperate. Later, science would prove that a world similar to Earth existed on the other side of the universe. However, on that planet, a certain event occurred that shattered the world, wiping out any form of life proliferation that existed there. As a result, the remnants of that planet began to fly toward Earth and strike it. People were shocked, looking up at the sky and seeing various fire comets falling on their planet. Because of these shards, parts of the distorted planet began to merge with Earth. In the middle of the city, a girl notices that from one of the shards, a gigantic tree emerged and spread across the Earth. This event was called the adhesion phenomena. Thus, unnatural laws and a variety of monsters were introduced to Earth, and creatures of all kinds began to appear. With this, 17% of Earth's area was affected, and humans lost control of these areas, calling them the danger zones. In the danger zone, on the day of the adhesion event, a creature resembling a demon holds the skull of a soldier in its hands. The last remaining soldier of the platoon is panting as he looks at the demon staring at him. After finishing off some soldiers, the creature continues to hold one, standing still. These places, taken over by monsters, are called dungeons. All the creatures that came from that world have a status table showing their strength. The name of the demon that wiped out the military platoon is Horn of Terror. That beast, called Horn of Terror, remains motionless, and the surviving soldier tries to reason about what he should do. Opening its demonic mouth, the terrifying monster charges at the last soldier, who, in return, starts firing his precision rifle at the creature. However, all the shots pass through the creature and merely bounce off its powerful carapace. As it continues running to kill its last victim, the beast quickly reaches the soldier and hits him squarely in the stomach, throwing him far away and making him spit blood with the impact of the punch. The man crashes against the wall, nearly passing out and completely defeated. Still trying to stand for all his friends who have already fallen, the young man is practically exhausted and out of strength. None of these humans had time to prepare for these creatures, as even a military soldier had only a basic status. Humans of the species had no ability to do anything. The creature begins to approach the fallen young soldier. The demon, with a malevolent smile, stares at the soldier, who cannot react or do anything. Even with all this catastrophe, humans had some luck. Finally, as the Horn of Terror charges to finish off his target, the soldier begins to summon a blue aura and suddenly manages to block the creature's punch. The natural limits that humans are born with as a species prevent them from reaching a very high level of evolution. However, the limitations of that species' potential, caused by Earth's natural laws, begin to crack. The soldier continues to hold the beast's attack. Then, with extreme ease, the soldier begins to lift the beast, crushing its hand while the monster tries to break free. The man's status, which was previously only B and D rank, begins to rise exponentially, and the seal he had as a human starts to break, surrounded by chains preventing him from evolving quickly. The soldier manages to awaken by breaking those bonds. The soldier uses a judo move, utilizing his new power to throw his opponent with all his strength. The man slams the beast into the ground, ending it immediately. After that, the soldier stares at the monster's body, determined to use his power from that day forward to help humans and defeat those beasts. Even though this phenomenon affected all humans on Earth, the awakened abilities were different for each person. Some who awakened these abilities decided to train and improve their new powers. Other individuals, who discovered their new potential and abilities, chose to use them for a purpose. Amidst the chaos, a new portal can be seen opening, with several horned demons invading Earth. However, their leader notices something. An army of humans stands in front of the portal, just waiting for the beasts to arrive. These individuals chose to use their new potential to reclaim control of the dungeons and the danger zone. They were special agents who worked for a single reason and were called adventurers. In front of that portal, a war between the horned demons and the humans began. Alongside that soldier who defeated the first of their monsters, the era of dungeons and the era of adventurers began. After the battle, where only a few human knights survived, the entire world glorified their deeds. Everyone was inspired by their strength and dedication, especially the first soldier who awakened his power and decided to fight against the beast. Not long after that, organizations focused solely on training adventurers were established worldwide. The best among these training facilities for teenagers in the Republic of Korea was one in particular. It managed to produce the best adventurers in the last 25 years and was recognized worldwide as the Warrior School. Returning to the moment when the two friends were talking, one of them mentions that at that school, they even teach students what happens inside a dungeon. The black-haired friend asks what happens if one of them dies, and his colleague replies that they have a reason to be confident since there's a test to enter it. However, before he can continue explaining, his attention is diverted to a group of girls who are screaming. The girls are completely in love with someone, claiming that this person is extremely attractive and has indescribable beauty. This person is a blonde boy with large ears, a half-elf, who is just sitting and being applauded by all the girls. The friends who are talking wonder what that is about, and one explains that the boy is always on TV. His name is Daev Choi. His father is a famous adventurer, and his mother is an elf. They say he's a genius, and people talk about how he will reach the highest rank of adventurers. The boy, with all his appearance and charisma, smiles at the girls, which makes them extremely excited. It is shown that he has already gone into the dungeon 14 times. The black-haired young man, seeing this, becomes extremely irritated because he doesn't think the boy is all that. His friend begins to tease him, saying that he's just jealous. The black-haired boy starts arguing with his friend, but his friend ignores him, noticing that another friend is coming and starts talking to him, inviting him to hang out. However, Jaryong, the black-haired boy, says he couldn't go, in hopes that at least his friends would have fun. The other black-haired young man starts teasing him, saying that he couldn't do that after the exams and that he should just go have fun with them. But before he can continue talking, his friend with parted hair quickly punches him in the stomach, telling Jaryong that it's okay for him not to go this time. Jaryong, who was looking at his phone, shifts his attention to his colleagues, thanking them and saying goodbye. The young man with parted hair asks his friend to be a bit more sensitive next time and wonders if he knows why Jaryong is doing all this. In a flashback, we see our protagonist, Jaryong, beside an elderly person on a hospital bed. Returning to the present moment, the boy, while walking through the city streets, looks at his phone and notices an alert because he hasn't paid that month's hospital bills. He also receives a notification from his boss, calling him to work since a new job has come in for him. Daev Choi, waving at his fans, notices something that catches all his attention, turning his gaze toward Jaryong. The blonde boy begins to stare at the young man's back, as, for some reason, he feels that something is wrong. His friend, who is also part of the warrior school, asks if that boy did something to the half-elf. However, Dai responds that he didn't. Looking at Jaryong, he thinks of something but assumes it must just be his imagination. Our protagonist, during his walk through the streets, is extremely stressed, telling himself that he doesn't want to work in an abandoned subway station. Jaryong begins to descend the stairs and passes through a warning tape blocking the passage. His boss, a man with white hair named Yihwin, introduces the person next to him, a bald man in a suit, as the new client Jaryong will be working for. The black-haired young man greets the client politely, saying it's a pleasure to meet him. However, the man becomes irritated upon seeing Jaryong. The bald man tells Yihwin that he expected the best employee. Yihwin insists that Jaryong is the best. The bald man starts arguing, accusing Yihwin of trying to fool him. Even with Jaryong by his side, the man remains disrespectful, demanding someone better and threatening that if Yihwin doesn't bring someone respectable, both he and Jaryong will regret it. A muscular man, the bald man's bodyguard, is called out by Jaryong. The boy asks if the man is an adventurer but rephrases, stating that the man must be a retired adventurer, now merely following orders. The bald man is shocked by Jaryong's bold attitude. Before he can respond, his subordinate, Lee Pigliu, interrupts, snapping his fingers and stating there's no need to continue the conversation. He offers to teach a lesson by breaking an arm or a leg of both Yihwin and Jaryong. The bald man, pleased, orders him to grab the boy, threatening their lives unless they beg. Jaryong pretends to be scared and sarcastically asks for help, questioning what he should do. However, his demeanor changes as a blue aura emanates from him. Jaryong declares that he doesn't know how to beg. It's revealed that our protagonist had illegally returned to the dungeon 371 times. As a form of government propaganda, it is explained how dungeon smuggling works. Adventurers explore dungeons, defeat monsters, and collect treasures, which must be handed over for government inspection. These treasures often have unimaginable powers, and improper handling can lead to dangerous consequences. Adventurers who bypass the system to avoid fees are considered criminals, creating risks for society. The propaganda urges citizens to report smugglers. Returning to the present, the fight between Lee Pigliu and Jaryong begins. Ewan lights a cigarette calmly while the bald man, confused, questions how Ewan can remain so composed. The man asks if Ewan is really going to allow this fight to happen. Ewan sarcastically asks if the bald man is chickening out. Insulted, the bald man declares that they should be the ones afraid. He reveals that Lee Pigliu retired not because of injuries, but because he attacked his teammates and warns that he won't go easy on Jaryong. Hearing this, Jaryong mocks Pigliu, calling him a criminal. Pigliu boasts that the teammate he killed was pathetic and was holding him back, so he simply threw the trash away. Jaryong laughs and mocks him further, calling him irresponsible and reminding him that he lost his license. Before Jaryong can continue, Pigliu lunges to punch him. However, Jaryong easily dodges by turning his face to the side, remarking that such an attack is rude. Enraged, Pigliu emits a green aura and charges at Jaryong to finish him off. Jaryong taunts him, stating he'll counter with a quick kick. With a powerful blow, Jaryong leaps and kicks Pigliu with immense force. Dazed, Pigliu struggles to process what just happened. Meanwhile, Ewan remains calm, and the bald man is impressed by Jaryong's speed. Ewan reiterates that Jaryong is indeed his most skilled employee. Pigliu, still shocked, tries to recover from the kick he just received. After the impact, Jaryong begins to taunt the man, saying there was a surprise since, judging by his appearance, he expected the bulky man to be a bit tougher. Ewan comments that Lee was lost as the boy treated the smuggler like just a normal kid. However, those reflexes and the power behind the kick to the man's chin had already reached a professional level. The boy also remarks that it seems the ex-adventurer is beginning to understand that this might be a fight he can't win. However, the bald man doesn't give up, stating that the kid was really good, but it was just a lucky kick. Before the bald man can continue speaking, Jaryong's boss responds that he could only feel pity for the big guy blinded by rage. Lee Pigliu removes his shirt, allowing his aura to surge even more, and Ewan, seeing this, asserts that Lee was undoubtedly a tank. Next to him, the bald man is extremely surprised that Ewan could read his subordinate's abilities. Ewan comments that the old man shouldn't be so shocked. The bulky man says that no matter what cheap tricks Jaryong decides to use, he's still just a smuggler. For that reason, he was going to show him something interesting. Immediately after, several veins begin to bulge on his body, and Lee starts charging a green energy. Jaryong explains that after the adhesion, people began to awaken abilities that exceeded their limitations. However, each person has different talents and types, and as expected, they awaken completely different latent abilities. Adventurers, of course, took on specific training that matched their abilities and assigned roles to themselves. Looking impressed at his rival, Jaryong states that one of those roles was called a tank. Lee Pigliu became extremely stronger and more muscular after using various techniques to perfect and increase his stats. The tank is a position where you protect your teammates from the dangers of the dungeon. In this role, the adventurer faces all the monsters head-on in the vanguard without being able to retreat or show fear. Strength in their bodies, trained to the limit, allows tanks to not even feel some bullets fired at them. However, higher-ranked tanks can withstand immense firepower and missiles easily and are essentially a protected barrier. Observing his rival's transformation, Jaryong acknowledges that he is powerful, affirming that the man truly is an adventurer. Lee Pigliu, after using all his buffs, quickly charges with both hands to attack the boy in front of him. Jaryong, though struggling, manages to dodge. But the ground isn't so lucky, and the entire floor of the subway is shattered, with debris flying everywhere. Our protagonist tries to land, feeling the air from all that power rushing toward him. The bald man, after sensing that power and being practically a normal human, is almost blown away by the wind it formed. However, a hand helps him stay on his feet. The one saving him is Ewan, who remains as if nothing had happened, calmly asking the bald man if he's okay. The man says that in any case, that adventurer is a bastard because he's really going to mess up someone else's business place just for a rivalry. Lee charges toward Jaryong, who is in a fighting stance, and the boy just watches his opponent advance. Quickly, the man throws another punch, and the boy narrowly dodges it with an extremely smug expression. Lee Pigliu asks our protagonist what's going on. He also questions why Jaryong isn't using any of his previous tricks, but the young man remains deep in thought. Jaryong retorts, stating that he's not an idiot and wouldn't fall for such an obvious trap like the one the tank is setting. Observing and feeling all the power radiating from Lee, Jaryong's boss remarks that the ex-adventurer isn't bad. Lee's physical strength is around the level of a truck, and if a normal person were hit, every bone in their body would be pulverized. But seeing that there could be more destruction in his territory, Ewan orders Jaryong to hurry up and finish it. Otherwise, the boy would have to pay for all the damage if anything else broke. The young man realizes he's running out of options. Lee Pigliu maintains the same expression as before, now saying that it seems the boy's boss doesn't understand what's happening. He also emphasizes that Jaryong's cheap tricks are no match for a professional's technique. However, Jaryong appears to ignore him and suddenly looks to the side, noticing that a strong metal beam is positioned beside him. He quickly places his hand on it. He doesn't understand the move and is confused, wanting to know what the young man is going to do with it. Jaryong begins to analyze the iron bar in his hand, realizing that it could actually be useful. He then states that it should at least be enough. While Jaryong is distracted, Lee Pigliu charges at him again, so furious that he's gritting his teeth, with his aura spilling out. Jaryong explains that due to their enormous durability, the general belief is that tanks are unbeatable beings. However, that's not the case because they have a very clear weakness and a natural enemy. At that moment, Ewan informs the bald man that the fight is over. Lee Pigliu continues to rush at his enemy, completely enraged and determined to end the battle. However, Jaryong doesn't retreat and also charges forward with the iron bar in his hand. The weakness of a tank is an entity that can focus a powerful and destructive force on a specific point. At that exact moment, with his improvised weapon, the boy moves to strike his enemy. Improving his strength and DPS is the primary weakness of a tank. After saying that, the boy strikes his opponent with the iron bar, unleashing a blast of energy backward with the blow. The ex-adventurer spits blood, practically fainting from the attack. Ewan isn't surprised at all, unlike the bald man, who is completely confused by what just happened before his eyes. After the strike, the tank immediately falls backward, unconscious for a few seconds, and then quickly regains consciousness with his mouth full of blood. Lee Pigliu asks how the protagonist learned to cut like that. Upon hearing this, the boy is confused, asking what the man is talking about. He says that he doesn't know what Lee is thinking, but he's definitely wrong. However, in his mind, he thinks that perhaps Lee isn't entirely wrong, as he may have seen that person before and therefore recognized Jaryong's cutting style. That person was his father, who was known worldwide and had once been extremely powerful. Our protagonist begins to recount his past. We see him as a child walking through the corridors of his house, reflecting on how, when he was very young, his father was the greatest adventurer in the world to him. The boy felt immense pride in the man, and his favorite pastime was watching his father train in the backyard. It wasn't just because he was family. The man truly was powerful. His name was Yu Seong. The man had a muscular appearance and radiated aura and power. This was the soldier we saw in the past, the first human to awaken and defeat one of the monsters. A flashback is shown to explain that Yu Seong was one of the heroes of the first generation, called the First Adventurers. The story of the first generation is a grand legend, but for the adventurers of that time, it was hell. They had to witness countless people losing their lives and face battles daily. More than anything, the main problem was that there was no information about the dungeons or what kinds of monsters inhabited them, which made exploration even more complicated. In the flashback, Yu Seong is seen alongside his ally, preparing to fight a giant worm-like monster. Even monsters that are considered easy to defeat in modern times were formidable challenges for adventurers in the past. The Gamel, the beast that Yu Seong faced, begins to spit a corrosive green liquid, hitting Yu Seong's friend. Yu Seong narrowly escapes the attack. But when he looks to the side, he sees his friend being dissolved by the worm's attack. For the adventurers of that time, any creature was an unknown capable of destroying everything. Yu Seong, after witnessing his friend being melted away, quickly becomes enraged and strikes the beast with his spear. This was a time when adventurers had no information to fight against the monsters. After delivering the blow, Yu Seong realizes something he didn't want to see. His titanium alloy spear wasn't resistant to the monster's attack. Items that are now considered common didn't even exist back then, so adventurers had to make do with what they had. The first generation of adventurers went through trial and error, risking their lives to discover more information about the dungeons. In the flashback, Seong charges at the worm in the underground dungeon. When Yu Seong's adventurers arrive as reinforcements, the three young adventurers, upon seeing the situation and what was happening, are left breathless, merely observing the scene. Amidst the many people who had been dissolved, the only one left standing was Seong, having defeated the creature with whatever he had at his disposal. The survivors passed on their experiences and accomplishments to the next generation to help them. After all their deeds for the good of humanity, they were considered heroes. Yu Seong lived this life, defeating creatures and unknown beings for many, many years. After evolving greatly as a hero and as a person, he became known as the Dragon Hunter. After years of adventuring, this nickname was given to the first person who managed to defeat a dragon. Seong was seen standing imposingly atop the body of one of those beasts. When people heard this news, they were shocked and amazed. Seong was considered the strongest adventurer in Asia. Despite his incredible feats, Seong was also an ordinary person and the father of our protagonist. The boy deeply respected him. Jaryong remembers his father training with his spear, showing all his power and aura, which created a massive windstorm. More than anyone else in the world, Jaryong believed his father was invincible until one fateful day. he saw something that traumatized him. Suddenly, the man who was in his physical prime and training hard began coughing up blood unexpectedly. As a child, Jaryong ran toward his father to see what was happening. However, his father asked him to stop and not come any closer. According to the doctors, the cause of this sudden weakness and decline was poisoning. Jaryong cried a lot as he watched his father in that state at the hospital. It was explained that during one of his explorations, his father had encountered a deadly poison that contaminated him. As he had always done, his father tried to overcome it, facing challenges head-on. However, after decades of overworking himself, his body was at its limit. Even the first dragon hunter couldn't withstand it. During the time Seong was weak, colleagues he had trusted with his life betrayed him. They handed him a piece of paper and revealed themselves as vipers who took advantage of Seong's vulnerability, stealing his fortune and the work of years. In addition to his illness, Seong suffered mentally and physically, believing that everything he had done was a mistake and that none of his efforts had been rewarded. Years passed, and even when Jaryong was already a teenager, he saw his father sitting in a hospital bed, his body severely weakened. Finally, Jaryong mentions that, years later, the world began to forget about the dragon hunter Yu Seong. His father lost his identity as a hero, having lost everything and suffering from an incurable poison that no medical science could cure. All that remained was the memory of a forgotten adventurer. Returning to the present, Jaryong had just defeated Lee Pigliu. The boy stares at his opponent, then turns around and starts walking away while the man tries to mutter something. After recalling all his memories, Jaryong becomes extremely irritated, throwing the piece of iron he was holding and walking toward the exit. The bald man is still shocked by everything he has seen, thinking that his subordinate was the strongest man. However, Yuan remarks that everything went well. The man remains incredulous, unable to believe that Lee Pigliu lost to a kid. But Jaryong's boss remarks that perhaps the bulky man wasn't a good adventurer, which could have been one of the reasons. Jaryong interjects, saying that the man bragged about hitting his own comrades, which was just a sign of how weak he truly was. As he continues walking past the bald man, the boy states that there are only two reasons why a good adventurer retires. Either their body breaks down to the point where they can no longer explore or face creatures, or they die during an exploration and are never seen again. He puts his jacket back on, saying he didn't know what Lee Pigliu's salary was, but if it was more than minimum wage, the bald man should fire him. Seeing this as an opportunity, Ewan approaches his client, apologizing and asking the bald man to understand their side. He asserts that the fee for the job will now be doubled due to the situation that occurred. The man in the suit is about to protest, but before he can, Jaryong's boss gives him a menacing look, adding that he and Jaryong don't work for free. Seeing that he wasn't in the best position, the bald man agrees and says it's fine. After some time, extorting his client, the boy's boss calls Jaryong over and asks if he has ever heard of the Imperial Wasp. Upon hearing this while drinking water, Jaryong immediately spits it out, wiping his mouth. Jaryong asks if they'll have to fight it, saying that even for him, that monster was a bit too much. Ewan explains that the Imperial Wasp is a monster whose danger level is considered the highest, not only in Korea but in the entire world. What was once a beautiful and lovely city called Yuo is now the nest of the Imperial Wasp and has become a demonic kingdom in Korea of extremely high difficulty. The boss continues, explaining that even for high-ranking adventurers, taking down one of these monsters is difficult because they spread out everywhere. For any smuggler, fighting one of these creatures is practically suicide. However, for a white-ranked adventurer, it's possible to accomplish. Jaryong mentions that, according to the bald man, there was a large raid the previous day that wasn't publicized. The boss adds that the government army and 7 white-ranked adventurers formed an attack squad to invade the wasp's nest. Jaryong is shocked that they gathered 7 white-ranked adventurers. Ewan adds that adventurers of that level are so famous that if even 2 of them come together, the media goes wild. It seems they failed to achieve their original goal of eradication, but the adventurers managed to hunt the queen wasp. However, one of the 7 stole the royal jelly of the Imperial Wasp and ordered a subordinate from the attack squad to smuggle it. Jaryong seems confused, not knowing what royal jelly is. Ewan explains that it's a nutritional supplement given to a newly born queen by the wasps. Struggling to understand, Jaryong asks why a white-ranked adventurer would smuggle a nutritional supplement, as it was extremely dangerous. The boss explains that there have been occasions where royal jelly was brought into this world. From what he knew, if a human consumed it, they could even come back from the dead. Upon hearing this, Jaryong is extremely shocked. In the underground city, in a deep subway, someone says that all paths to the dungeons are now strictly controlled. This person begins walking through the abandoned corridors toward a certain location, repeating this phrase several times. It's revealed that this person is the protagonist's boss, as he looks at a gate with various red markings. He thinks this proves there's always a way to bypass government restrictions. With a blue aura around his hand, he begins to touch the gate, merging his magic with the markings. His energy reacts with the gate's energy, and a massive blue light shines through the area. The auras merge with the markings, and the red markings disappear. Jaryong is right behind his boss. Yiwen tells him that, even though he always says this, he'll repeat it. Jaryong should be careful. As he cleans his hands, he concludes that this job will be especially annoying and more troublesome than others. For some reason, Jaryong remains silent the entire time, just listening, trying to get the boy's attention. Yiwen blows a puff of smoke from his cigarette into the young man's face. The young man waves his hand to disperse the smoke and asks why his boss did that so suddenly. Yiwen explains that he did it because the boy had his head in the clouds and wasn't paying attention to the mission. The boss asks if Jaryong is acting this way because he's still thinking about the medicine that could bring the dead back to life. Jaryong starts walking toward the gate, stating that it doesn't make sense since such things are unreliable. Leaning against the massive gate, he thinks that even if it's considered an unparalleled antidote, it wouldn't cure his father's condition. With that, the young man begins to open the mysterious gate, from which a strong light starts to emerge. The boy thinks that if something like that existed, his father would never have abandoned that thread of hope. After opening the gate and passing through it, the young man finds himself in a mountainous region with a beautiful landscape and a clear blue sky. Jaryong shields his eyes from the sunlight to get a better view of the stunning scenery in front of him. After the adhesion dungeons were created all over the earth, 2 of them were considered the largest in Korea, and they were peculiar. The first is Judu, a dungeon fused with a volcanic mountain range that has active volcanoes and burning rocks. The second is fused with the Iger jungle. At that moment, the young man begins preparing for exploration. The Iger dungeon is located in what used to be Yuo, in the middle of Su, where Yuo is situated. It is possible to see a destroyed city now overtaken by a forest. The young man explains that with Ido at the center of Mapo, Yen, and other nearby cities, all are controlled by this dungeon, and most of it remains unknown. A large portion of the region is ranked D, but Yuo, where the wasp is located, is ranked as the person responsible for the jelly tried to transport it to the mining area in Borma. Yiwen explains that, after arriving there, the transporter lost contact with the others, while he might have fled. That is not the most likely option. The boss speculates that the man must have dealt with all sorts of challenges to get out of there, and Jaryong's mission is to reach the location and bring back the jelly. Before Jaryong sets off, Yiwen finishes his thought, asking the young man not to get distracted and focus on the mission. Smiling while putting on a mask, the boy asks if his boss thinks he would run away. However, Yiwen firmly states that the boy isn't stupid enough to do that. The boss also asks his subordinate to be careful, reminding him that the royal jelly is precious, and humans aren't the only ones willing to risk their lives for it. After his boss's speech, the boy uses a rope to safely descend from the cliff into the middle of the forest. There, in the center, he notes that the entire forest must be filled with that peculiar odor. However, when he looks down, something catches his attention, leaving the young man shocked and irritated. On the forest soil lies an enormous footprint of a giant, and the boy states that he's certain various creatures will be attracted by the jelly's scent. Meanwhile, deeper within that vast expanse of trees and foliage, several birds take flight. A girl with pointed ears is seen, extremely out of breath and running from something. She stops for a moment to rest behind a tree and catch her breath. Her name is Jin Serum, and she is in her first year as a warrior, currently facing the biggest problem of her life. It was supposed to be an easy trip to the dungeon for her intermediate exam, but the girl is frozen and utterly terrified. Looking to the side, Jin remains worried, realizing that instead of something easy as it should have been, she has encountered a monster that should never have been there. It is revealed that the creature chasing Jin is a gigantic beast. She continues trying to stay silent and still, hoping to escape the beast hunting her. However, a gust of wind begins to approach the girl, and she realizes something she didn't want to acknowledge. The exam was supposed to be simple. Within the time limit, Jin had to collect as many coins as possible inside the dungeon, although the test was designed to simulate real combat situations. The test area was ranked as low as possible and should have been easy. It was considered a training ground for beginners. The monster chasing Jin silently approaches, and when the girl realizes it, the beast is grinning right behind her. Jin becomes desperate, realizing that even the monsters living there are weak and had low intelligence, but this one was different. The giant, with 4 arms and immense strength, tries to strike the girl, but she narrowly escapes. Jin thinks she should run, but looking at the size of the monster, she realizes that's impossible. She decides to make another choice. At that moment, the girl decides to hope for a miracle. She draws her bow and 3 arrows from her quiver to arm herself. Despite all the difficulties, she resolves to fight back. The 3-star ranked Primal Titan begins to prepare a monstrous breath attack. In a desperate attempt to save her life, Jin fires 3 arrows at her enemy. Unfortunately, the monster easily raises a hand to shield its face, successfully blocking the weak attack. The girl realizes the Titan's skin is tougher than that of a tank, and her chances of winning are almost nil. The primal Titan, using one of its 4 arms, strikes the ground, causing a gust of wind and rocks to fly into the air. However, with extreme skill and speed, Jin manages to escape once again. Even in the air, Jin prepares to fire another arrow. She thinks that no matter how many arrows she shoots, it's impossible to pierce the monster. Yet, she has no other choice. 3 more of her arrows fly toward the beast, but this time they are propelled by wind. Though they only superficially pierce the Titan's body, the monster remains unfazed, maintaining its terrifying expression. Looking at the beast, Jin thinks she doesn't need to kill it with her attacks or make it dodge or block them. She just wants to get it a little closer and hopes it will lower its guard. The new arrow that Jin readies is imbued with fire. The girl is certain her plan will work. As she lands on the ground, she channels more magic into her arrow. As a warrior who can imbue magic into her arrows, Jin prepares a powerful attack. She uses her flame bombardier skill, firing an arrow that tears through the ground. It is explained that the magic imbued in arrows has no limits. Jin chooses the largest explosion she can manage. After hitting the target, the arrow explodes, causing a massive blaze visible throughout the forest. Jin stares at the spot, trying to see if she defeated the beast. Despite her powerful attack, the smoke clears to reveal the monster clinging to 2 trees, having narrowly avoided the explosion. Furious, the Titan looks enraged, maintaining a terrifying expression. Even with all her power, Jin realizes the attack would have only worked if it had hit its target. Various thoughts flood her mind, and Jin begins to consider that she might die. Before she can think about running, the monster lands on the ground, determined to end her. It charges at her quickly. In desperation, Jin runs in the opposite direction, trying to escape. The Titan continues with a psychotic expression, merely enjoying the chase as its prey struggles desperately. However, as if by a miracle from the heavens, just as she had wished, our protagonist suddenly appears, striking the Titan with a weapon. Looking up at the sky, Jin is incredulous at what just happened, gazing at her savior as if he were her hero. Still in the air, Jaryong locks eyes with the girl he had just saved, while Jin remains astonished at everything that transpired. The giant, having taken a solid hit to the chin, is still somewhat dazed, trying to stay on its feet. Our protagonist safely lands on top of a tree and thinks that even though he struck the creature on the chin, it didn't seem to be enough. Looking down, the boy notices that the beast is glaring at him with a terrifying expression. He pulls a strange object from his pocket, something resembling a weapon, a tool for adventurers. With his bait in one hand and the tool in the other, the boy charges into battle to defeat the beast. Jin, witnessing the situation, is extremely impressed because she never imagined the young man would be bold enough to attack the monster head-on. The girl thinks that the young man is heading towards certain death. The enraged primate Titan lunges to attack him with its 2 massive arms, shouting loud enough for the girl to hear. Jaryong tells her to close her eyes immediately. Even though she doesn't fully understand what he's talking about, she quickly follows his advice. Jaryong points his tool at the monster's face. As the beast and Jaryong are on the verge of a deadly encounter, a powerful light begins to emit from the tool. The young man quickly closes his eyes, and a blinding light illuminates a large part of the forest. The Titan, unaware of what was happening, is completely affected by the light shooting directly into its eyes, leaving it temporarily blind. Jin, heeding the unknown boy's advice, quickly closes her eyes and raises her arm to shield herself from the intense brightness. The monster, now disoriented and enraged, roars in frustration. Afterward, Jaryong lands on the ground, thinking that he used all the power of the tool. He knows that this was his last one. What he was holding is called a stun light, a tool made from the scales of the oscillating fish that live in dungeons deep in the ocean. The stun light has an incredible ability called incapacitate, beloved by countless adventurers for its effectiveness. However, due to its misuse, which caused several adventurers to lose their vision, its production has been strictly banned in the present day. Even with her eyes closed, Jin, unaccustomed to the tool's reach, slowly begins to open them, passing by her with his baton. Jaryong says he did all of this for her, and now she has to find a way to survive on her own because she only has a few seconds left. Our protagonist thinks that no matter what happens in the dungeon, as long as he doesn't do anything for the adventure, he probably won't be reported. The boy recalls the moment when his boss said smugglers are like cockroaches to adventurers, despite their high bounties. So, if he acted without thinking, he could be outsmarted and handed over to the government. For this reason, he decides to do nothing further. As he runs, the boy maintains a firm expression but notices something behind him that stresses him out. The young man realizes that the girl from before is trying to follow him. Not knowing her intentions, Jaryong complains. Even though she's out of breath, Jin doesn't give up on her goal and continues running after her savior to thank him. With all the lessons he has learned about not being outsmarted, Jaryong makes a decision. Using his incredible speed, he vanishes. Jin, who was right behind him, suddenly loses sight of the boy. As she asserts that he was just there, she is caught off guard by a baton striking her neck, pushing her back. Our protagonist pins the girl to the ground and calls her stupid, asking what she was doing. Jin innocently explains that she just wanted to thank him for saving her. Coldly, Jaryong retorts, asking if she's joking, as he's not foolish enough to fall for that. Revealing her cunning side, Jin admits she didn't follow him just to thank him but because she knew the boy was a smuggler. However, she assures him that she has no intention of capturing him. Instead, she wants to offer him a job. Hearing this, Jaryong remains silent for a moment. Seeing the emblem of the Warrior Academy on her shirt, he sighs and lets her go, removing his baton from her neck. The boy warns her that this is her last chance to survive. As he walks away, Jaryong says he has no interest in dealing with a student of the Warrior Academy. In an imposing tone, he warns Jin that if she interferes with him again, he will truly bury her. Jin, understanding the seriousness of his threat, remains silent. Even so, she doesn't give up. Jin mentions the bounty for smugglers is 50 million, but the bounty for hunters is 400 million. Jaryong, taking this as an affront, becomes enraged. However, his mood changes when he notices something in Jin's hand. She is holding a necklace called Blood of Angel. Jin explains that it could only be bought with the reward for capturing 5 smugglers, totaling over 200 million. Sweating, she tells Jaryong this is just the initial payment. If he helps her with the exam, she promises to pay him even more. Seeing her determination, Jaryong sighs unexpectedly. He apologizes, stating that it's Jin's fault for involving herself. However, before she can respond, a huge shadow blocks the sun, plunging them into darkness. Looking up, Jaryong warns Jin that he already told her she only had a few seconds. In the sky, the primate beast, now recovered and furious, leaps to attack them. As the monster crashes to the ground with its 4 arms, the 2 youths narrowly escape. Suddenly, Jin sees something flying toward her. Catching it, she realizes it's the same baton Jaryong used earlier. He tells her he didn't give it to her just to stare at. Jaryong asks if she remembers the attack he used before. Jin recalls the moment she conjured fire on the arrow. Jaryong then tells her to do it again, to conjure flames on the baton and throw it back to him. However, the girl panics, stating that she has no magical power left. Before Jin can say anything more, our protagonist insists that she has to figure it out. The monster prepares to attack again, and Jaryong warns that he won't be able to keep the Titan's attention for much longer with just his fists, so Jin needs to hurry. Jin begins to channel her magic into the baton and thinks that she has less than a quarter of her magical power left since she spent it all on her last strike. The battle between the Titan and the protagonist ensues, and the young woman considers that she can't deal any damage to the monster with so little power. Instead, she thinks she should flee while the boy is distracting the creature. Meanwhile, Jaryong continues to fight intensely, trying to stay alive. Despite being a bit annoyed, he keeps running, drawing the monster's attention. Before he realizes it, with extreme speed and precision, a flaming baton comes flying towards him. The young man catches it after Jin uses all that was left in her. Watching the baton, Jin thinks she must be crazy to risk so much for just one person. With that, Jaryong leaps into the air and starts spinning with his baton. Then he states that he's disappointed. The boy says it's much less than a quarter of what she used before and that it's really disappointing. However, he believes it should still be enough. With confidence, the young man wields his baton and charges to attack the monster. The battle reaches its peak. At this moment, Jin reflects that the students of the Warrior Academy have heard this more times than they can count. Analyzing the incredible battle, the girl notes that in a fight with a monster, the most important thing for an adventurer isn't just brute strength. The most important thing is a sense of timing. At this moment, our protagonist is executing it perfectly, dodging attacks and waiting for the right moment. The key is to seize the perfect timing to aim precise strikes. At that moment, the primate titan misses its attack, leaving itself exposed. In other words, what adventurers must value above all else is the effectiveness of their attack. At that moment, Jin is deeply impressed by Jaryong's skill. Jaryong, after dodging all the Titan's attacks and utilizing perfect timing, seizes the opportunity to strike the monster's chin with his baton. An explosion occurs, and after it disperses, the beast's chin is completely disfigured, its face utterly destroyed. The glasses Jaryong was wearing shatter, but upon realizing that his attack was indeed effective and that he had won, the boy allows himself a small smile. A flashback shows a beautiful school illuminated by the rays of the setting sun on the horizon. Young Jin has just finished playing with her friends. As it's time to go home, the girl bids them farewell. She sees a bodyguard waiting for her with a car ready to take her home. The girl says goodbye to her friends, planning to meet them the next day to play again. However, Jin overhears some gossip among her friends, saying that she is very lucky to have whatever she wants. Jin thinks they are entirely wrong, as she really could have almost everything she desired due to her social status. Her father owns a South Korean company ranked 4th, the Jinsung Group, which is globally known and highly renowned. The successor of the group married an elf from another world. From this relationship, something extraordinary was born, Jin Serum, a half-elf girl with dark hair and a determined spirit. She respected adventurers more than anyone else and admired them as inspirations. Jin dreamed of becoming an adventurer and was willing to give up everything to follow her dream. Shortly after that flashback, a blonde elf is seen saying something is impossible. Jin is utterly exhausted, lying on the ground. At this moment, the blonde elf says the girl's elven blood is very weak and that she might as well be mostly human. The blonde elf tells someone next to him that continuing to push the girl is wrong, and it would be better to convince her otherwise. Jin's father, Jin Sunu, says he isn't forcing the girl to do anything, just supporting her dream of becoming an adventurer. He adds that it's not like elven talents are a requirement to become an adventurer. The elf in front of him agrees and states that compared to a human, the girl does have considerably good talent. However, despite her efforts, it won't be enough to stand out among monster-ranked humans. The elf concludes by saying that Jin's life of privilege will make her efforts futile, as talent doesn't fall from the sky. We return to the moment when Jaryong defeated his enemy. Jin, watching the scene, is completely astonished after witnessing so many events unfold. When our protagonist finally lands on the ground, the monster's body also crashes with a tremendous impact in the forest. The beast is completely destroyed and defeated after taking that powerful attack directly to its face. With a baton in hand, our protagonist walks until something catches his attention. As he looks to the side, Jaryong notices Jin, who is completely shocked, staring at him as if she's seen a ghost. Muttering that it's impossible, Jin thinks her savior is just a high school teenager. Touching his face, the young man finally realizes what happened, becoming extremely irritated at his carelessness. In a flashback, Ewan can be seen advising Jaryong to be careful not to break his glasses since they were quite expensive. Holding the strange glasses in his hand, Jaryong comments that they should only cost around 5,000 won as they look like an ordinary item. However, his boss denies this, explaining that those glasses prevent facial recognition, alter the wearer's voice, and have more than 4 magical enchantments. Back in the present, the expensive glasses are completely shattered on the ground after Jaryong delivers that powerful attack. Placing his hand over his face, the boy mutters that things are going as he wanted and that it is frustrating. Still confused, the young woman asks if the boy is a veteran of the Warrior Academy. Irritated by everything that has happened that day, as he just wanted a normal mission, Jaryong harshly answers, no. With extreme anger, veins bulging on his face, Jaryong demands that the young woman hand over what she had promised. Unexpectedly, without hesitation, she quickly hands over the necklace, leaving him surprised by how easily it was done. He becomes annoyed by how rich Jin is and quickly snatches the jewel from her hand before she can even get a good look at it. With the necklace in his hand, Jaryong begins to examine it closely. After a brief look, he confirms that it isn't fake. Catching his attention once more, Jin asks if the boy needs more money. She mentions that she understands, even if he doesn't attend the Warrior Academy, that the tuition for adventurers' education centers is quite high. However, before she can offer to pay his tuition, the young man clarifies that he doesn't attend any adventurer school. The girl is even more astonished, and he replies that she is completely mistaken in her assumptions. Jaryong explains that he didn't go to any adventurer school and had never even been close to one. On the contrary, he studied at a regular school. The girl then asks who taught him to fight, and Jaryong responds that no one did. Approaching her with both hands in his pockets and a serious expression, he states that he learned on his own. This time, it is Jin who becomes irritated. She yells, saying that is utter nonsense. The girl argues that his movements and sense of timing aren't those of someone who had never been trained and accuses Jaryong of joking. However, in a rude and not at all gentlemanly manner, something flies toward the girl, hitting her in the face. Realizing that Jaryong has thrown something at her, she catches it in her hand and asks what it is. Upon examining it, Jin realizes it is a school ID card. Removing the identity from the plastic, she begins to analyze the information of her savior. Seeing the card, she notices it belongs to Donging Secondary School and sees that the name of the protagonist is Yu Jaryong. Jaryong says she doesn't need to make an effort to remember it since that school is just another ordinary one among many in the country. After so many unbelievable events, the girl is on the verge of a breakdown, declaring that it is impossible. Not wanting to be outdone, Jaryong points his baton at the girl and orders her to hand over something to prove her identity, whether it is a student ID or something similar. After receiving it, the young man begins to read it and notices that the girl's name is Jin Serum. After checking, he confirms the document is genuine. Our protagonist also confirms that the girl is the same age as him and that she indeed belongs to the Warrior Academy. For some reason, he puts her ID in his pocket. When Jin asks why he is doing that, Jaryong explains that she had made an offer, and he couldn't take any risks since his identity had been revealed. If he were to take on a mission for Jin, he needed some assurance that he wouldn't be betrayed by her. Moreover, Jaryong mentions that he wouldn't do a job without taking necessary precautions, adding that he still intends to do one last thing. The young man pulls out his phone and suddenly puts his arm around Jin's shoulders, pulling her into a side hug. This leaves the girl very flustered. Jaryong explains that he's going to take a selfie with Jin because if she ever betrays him, the photo will serve as proof that Jin was also an accomplice to a smuggler. As the two take the photo, the girl remains in shock. At that moment, Jaryong realizes she might have made a serious mistake. With a menacing expression, Jaryong tells her to smile for the picture. It is at that instant that she understands she has gotten involved with someone far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Forcing a small, nervous laugh, the girl gives a fake smile for the camera, but it is too late to back out. Everything has already started. Jaryong snaps a picture with Jin beside the corpse of the Titan. After taking the selfie, the boy continues to look at the phone screen, ensuring everything in the image is just right. He then tells Jin they should start discussing prices and asks what exactly she wants. Still processing the young man's intense personality, Jin states that her mission is to collect coins. She explains that within the 6-hour time limit, she must collect coins placed in various locations throughout the test area. Her goal is to find a box that contains a coin at a specific location to prove she is a student of the Warrior Academy. The girl mentions that she has already retrieved one coin, so she only needs to collect one more to pass the school's test. Finally, Jin concludes by informing Jaryong that the box containing the last necessary coin is quite close by. Our protagonist asks where it is located. The girl reveals that the box is in the ruins of the old Eugene shopping mall. Hearing this, the boy is surprised, as if he has figured something out. Jaryong remarks that he understands everything, but Jin finds his reaction odd. Seeing this, Jaryong decides to explain that he realizes their meeting wasn't a coincidence since what he is searching for is also in the mall. Jaryong gives a brief explanation of the mission he is on. The girl is incredulous, shouting that she couldn't believe the boy is after the Imperial Wasp. Correcting himself, Jaryong clarifies that he isn't after the wasp itself but something like its honey or jelly, though he isn't sure exactly what it is. Jaryong mentions that this jelly apparently has a very strong scent that attracts monsters and that the primate titan was probably drawn to it as well. Our protagonist states that it doesn't really matter but asks if the girl really needs to go to the mall, also inquiring if there isn't another place with coins. Apprehensive and with her head down, the girl informs him that the mall is the only place with a coin left now because other groups have likely taken all the other boxes. Hearing this, the boy just stares at the girl. Upon hearing about the groups, he quietly realizes why she is alone. Determined to help Jin, Jaryong says it's okay and that it is actually more convenient for him this way. He tells Jin they will enter the place, get the coin and the jelly, and then leave in complete safety. He is about to mention the fee, but the girl, already set on her goal, says she will pay 950 million won. She adds that it is all the money she has. Upon hearing that enormous amount, our protagonist is very impressed by the girl's wealth. Jin goes on to say that if it isn't enough, she would just need a little more time. Before she can continue, Jaryong interrupts, saying it is sufficient. Turning to start walking toward their objective, the boy says he'll charge more if there's an emergency, but if the plan goes well, that amount will suffice. The boy asks if the girl has enough stamina to run now, and she promptly nods, saying yes. They immediately start a quick run into the forest to reach their goal. The young woman, who is a bit behind and completely out of breath, analyzes Jaryong running effortlessly ahead of her and thinks the boy is incredibly fast. As our protagonist runs, he sighs, thinking he accepted the offer too quickly and should have asked for more money since the girl seems wealthy. During the run, Jin shouts, asking if she can ask the boy a specific question. With a bored expression, he allows her to ask. She inquires if he really learned everything on his own. Surprising the girl, he responds that not everything, but the vast majority was learned through training alone. As they continued on their path, Jaryong began to explain his past, mentioning that when he was a child, however, before he could finish his sentence, the boy sensed danger. Right in front of them, two strange alien-like creatures were hunting their prey. These beasts, known as sunbee raptors, are a species native to what was once boar. Upon seeing them, Jaryong quickly tells Jin to prepare for a fight. She, who was running alongside him, quickly halts, draws her bow, and gets ready to attack the beast. To her surprise, with incredible speed, Jaryong doesn't even wait for her and charges to engage the creatures. It's explained that Jaryong never received any official training as an adventurer. The skills he possesses now were acquired by risking his life. However, there's one exception. When he was younger, he witnessed his father's incredible movements, which allowed him to learn 3 specific techniques. As he approaches the monster with his baton, Jaryong uses one of those techniques against the Sunbee raptor. The first of these techniques is called the needle, where he uses all his speed and weight to strike a vital point of his opponent. At this moment, the boy executes the move. It is a simple yet refined technique that he gained through experience, senses, and above all, his talent. It's a technique that even top-ranked adventurers have not mastered. But Jaryong has perfected it, defeating the first of the monsters with a single strike. Since the other monster was only a 2-star, it was easily defeated by Jin, who sustained only a few scratches. After putting her bow away, Jin comments that something feels off since Sunbee raptors usually travel in groups of at least 5. Hearing this, Jaryong informs her that it means she wasn't the only one affected by the scent of the royal jelly. He adds that all sorts of monsters are likely nearby. At this point, they've already reached the outskirts of the city where the shopping mall is located. Noticing that Jin doesn't seem to be in the best condition, Jaryong suggests they take a quick break before continuing. Returning to the previous conversation, Jin asks if he had any personal training when he was younger. Once again, he responds that he didn't, that he only watched someone train and managed to mimic that person's movements. Since Jaryong rarely gets asked this question, he wonders why Jin is so curious about it. Instead of answering, Jin becomes extremely frustrated, stating that after all this, she really doesn't like him. Suddenly, the young woman throws something at Jaryong, who quickly catches it, not understanding what it is. Upon examining it, he realizes it's a stamina vial, an extremely expensive item. Seeing this, Jaryong asks if she's really going to give it to him for free. Jin urges him to drink it because he's probably not in his original condition due to exhaustion. However, Jaryong points out that Jin just said she didn't like him but then gave him a gift, so she wasn't keeping her word. To the girl's surprise, the boy begins to pocket the vial. Jin asks why he's doing that. Jaryong responds that he won't drink it because he could sell it later. Furious, Jin starts arguing, saying it's worth a lot and that he should just take it. Still, Jaryong explains that he knows the item's value and could sell it on the black market for a good amount of money. Mentally cursing the boy, Jin thinks he's strange and extremely weird, but she knows he's all she has. Changing his mind, Jaryong says that since she doesn't need rest after drinking the vial, they should continue their adventure. Noticing that Jin is still distracted and reflecting on everything, Jaryong thinks that rich kids are strange and don't care much about money. Afterward, the two approach the mall, and Jaryong comments that Jin already knows this, but they should go over the plan one more time to be sure. He states that their goal isn't to hunt any monsters, but to grab what they need and leave immediately. He adds that no matter how many monsters are inside, she should always follow his instructions and keep her composure. Finally, Jaryong says he's sure Jin has learned a lot, but his specialty is survival and she just needs to trust him. For some reason, Jin is acting strangely, unable to identify the cause of the weird sensation she's feeling. Last semester, Jin was a stranger at the Warrior Academy, unrecognized by others and often excluded. However, this is the first time she's ventured into danger with a companion who didn't belittle her. As Jaryong stands up, he declares they should get moving. Jin remains apprehensive, knowing she's about to face imminent danger. The two of them stand in front of an old shopping mall, which is completely overrun by vegetation. Inside, everything is dark and ruined, with the forest and trees having taken over the place. Suddenly, something frightens both Jin and Jaryong, putting them on high alert. An overwhelming pressure begins to envelop them. Jin asks what it is, but even Jaryong doesn't know, as he's never encountered anything like it. Looking ahead, they notice several mutilated monster corpses. Humans are capable of being braver than they imagine when properly motivated. However, the only obstacle is events that fall outside the scope of their initial plan. The mutilated monsters aren't from this area. They're dangerous even for professional explorers. Seeing the carnage, they can't imagine what could be there. Jaryong tells Jin not to lose focus. She's surprised because the scene is scarier than she imagined, but so far, nothing has changed. As soon as he finishes speaking, she sees something in the shadows, a silhouette moving. Jaryong draws a spear as the creature steps into view. It's a slasher lip, a monster with a danger level between 2 and 3 stars. Without wasting time, Jaryong charges toward the creature. Its mouth opens, revealing a massive tongue heading straight for him. Quickly, Jaryong defends himself using his staff, but the creature manages to grab the weapon with its tongue. Taking advantage of the contact, the creature retracts its tongue with enough force to pull Jaryong along with the staff. Before getting closer to the creature, Jaryong lets go of the weapon. If he hadn't, he would have been caught. From above, he prepares to land a kick, and the attack is accurate. From a distance, Jin watches attentively, waiting for the right moment to strike. Calmly, Jaryong retrieves his staff from the ground. Jin finds the encounter terrifying, as she hadn't expected the creature to still be alive. Its survival ability is high. But Jaryong explains that it wasn't just that. The boy kept the creature alive longer on purpose. This confuses Jin, who wants to know why. Jaryong explains that the creature's scream would serve as an alarm, warning him if any other danger approached. Another figure appears, saying he has a lot to clean up. Jaryong, apprehensive, asks if they know each other. The stranger replies that the two seem too inexperienced to be smugglers. Looking more closely at them, he saw a crest on the girl's clothing. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared and was now on the ground in front of them, asking if they were from the warrior school. Answering the question, the girls said they were. If that's the case, he didn't even know what kind of team they were. But it's a pity because they were going to end up dying in that place. Hearing this, the girl was terrified. The boy asked why she was paying attention to those words. That person wasn't a normal explorer, as she should have guessed. He was a villain who had come to kill them and steal the royal jelly. Then he said he must not have contact with his commissioner and shouldn't touch his things without authorization. But he said he only had to deal with the consequences of his actions if caught, and so far, he'd been very lucky. He had heard that his companion was smuggling a highly valuable item. The plan was to ambush him along the way, but things ended up happening differently. He failed the task of exterminating them. He confirmed that he had entered there but still hadn't managed to find him, though he imagined that he must be hiding somewhere. Smugglers use tricks like this. Hearing this, the boy realized that this was why contact had been cut off at the smuggling center, and not because of the wasp's venom. It was all the work of the guy who had just appeared. Even without having started fighting, Jaryong could already sense that this opponent would be tough, and he even suggested that he could provide a painless death if they cooperated. This man was certainly ranked higher than the weirdo they encountered earlier. Jaryong told the girl to find the coins and run because he would buy them some time. With the deeds of that guy, there shouldn't be too many monsters left, and she should run fast while he was still talking to her. The weirdo had started his attack, even though it had been abnormally fast. His sword missed the target. Now the boy reinforced the command for her to flee and stop being stupid. To make money, it was necessary for her to be okay. Seeing her leave, the weirdo got upset and furiously said that wasn't a wise decision. Working together until now had increased their chances of survival, but the boy wasn't thinking about that right now. Poised, he began to channel his power, and in his eyes, there was only focus and determination. His staff was wielded with mastery and violence. This scared the weirdo, who realized his movements had been telegraphed. Now, something was headed towards his face. It was Jaryong's foot, which stomped his face furiously. The weirdo's body flew from the impact, but the boy knew that things weren't over yet. He heard the weirdo say he was surprised by what had happened. Indeed, he had underestimated them for being young, but now he would use his equipment. Even though he was young, he was better than the average professional, so the weirdo would have to get more serious. Then he told him not to be scared, as it would be quick. This was young Dajian, a gold-class adventurer. The ground was cracked with multiple fissures. The kettle had been heated, and someone said that wasn't bad at all. In fact, his instant noodles were very good. Looking at the bald man, he offered him some, but he declined. He should at least sit down as it would take a while for the guy to wake up from his beauty sleep. The bald man was furious as he had paid a lot of money to the guy who was sleeping in the middle of the job. He walked around arrogantly, saying he had been an adventurer. The other man told him not to be so hard on him. He didn't lose because he was bad. He lost because he needed to. What people ignore is that adventurers don't just fight humans. That guy must have been trained in hunting and exploring, not in fighting other people. Not being used to it, it's expected that he would lose to his smuggler. The bald man was outraged and said that even among adventurers, he'd heard different things. Indeed, among them, there are those who fight each other. The better they get, the greater the rewards, and fights become inevitable. Even companions end up giving into greed and betraying their colleagues. Hearing that, the bald man didn't want to believe that they kill each other, but there's no one to stop them. Not to mention that there are no rules inside the dungeons. You just say a monster killed him, it doesn't even require an alibi. In fact, the higher their rank, the more they need to be prepared to fight others. But things aren't that simple. The sleeper's class wasn't high enough, which is why he's on the ground now. Attacking a companion, that's cute. And if he got caught, it means a peaceful fight happened outside the dungeon. It was certainly a discussion without equipment, but the bald man didn't know what equipment was. It's the weapons and armor that the adventurer takes to the dungeon. Even if insignificant, with them, the sleeper could have put up more of a fight. They're strong enough to make a difference. He knew the weirdo hadn't dodged his attack. That blow was accurate and forceful, hitting him squarely. The blade has high defense. While thinking, the weirdo told him not to get distracted. Faced with the imminent blow, he blocked the strike with his staff. Being distracted is not very respectful on his part, neither to his opponent nor to his own life, which could end in the blink of an eye. Taking advantage of the moment, he kicked the boy in the stomach. The blow was very strong, and he was thrown several meters before crashing into something. He stopped his advance by planting his feet on the ground. As soon as he stopped, the weirdo was already on top of him once again and delivered several slashes with his blade. Unable to block all of them, some small cuts found their way to his body. A small wound appeared on his cheek. The weirdo was now very confident and taunted him, telling him to fight like before if he was capable. That was impossible. The shadow jacket was an S-rank armor, and the weirdo was wearing one. It uses the user's blood to increase defense against physical damage as well as boost strength. That weirdo, at this very moment, was using Berserker combat. It would be hard to find openings, but not impossible. However, if he attempted a poorly planned counterattack, he would die without a doubt. The battle continued, and the weirdo was out of control. A quick slash was made at abdomen height. This caused the boy to panic, and the weirdo said he had fallen for his feet. Even so, he had lasted a long time. However, that wasn't what he expected to see. The boy asked him if today was some special day. Taking off the jacket he was wearing, he stood up and said that he really liked the weirdo's jacket. Despite everything, that guy wasn't as strong as he had imagined. He had been scared because the guy had a huge aura, but if he didn't do more than that against an unequipped student, he must be a mediocre fighter who relies on it. If the boy had a jacket like that, hearing these words hit the weirdo's ego hard. He started screaming uncontrollably and said the boy would pay for his insolence. Jaryong all knew that the one who needed to hurry was not him. His opponent had to win the fight, find Jin, and finish her off. The advantage was his. If he kept driving out the fight, it would make the weirdo impatient, and Jaryong was well aware of that. His focus and concentration were entirely on that goal. The weirdo advanced furiously to finish the battle in front of him. The boy prepared to defend himself. The clash between the weapons was powerful, emanating aura from both. When he was just a little kid, he learned this just by watching. This was the second technique. A vortex of blue aura emerged between them. His strength wasn't enough for this, so he used the enemy's strength to inflict an attack he wouldn't be able to do on his own. The name of this technique, which he hadn't even perfected yet, is Swell, and its effect is devastating. That single blow had been extremely powerful. The explosion created by the impact was enormous. He now supported his staff on the ground. His insides were injured. The technique had taken a high toll. He couldn't imagine he would use that in a real fight. It had even crossed his mind, and to think that a professional adventurer would be someone who only attacked head-on and nothing more. He invited the weirdo to give up as his time was up. Drawing a dagger, he told the boy to shut his mouth. His hands were trembling as if they were afraid. Unexpectedly, he stabbed his own chest with it. The boy hadn't expected that, but the weirdo said that no matter what happened, he would make sure of one thing: killing that brat. On the 5th floor of the department store, something was happening. The Jinn seemed to have reached its destination. She had come across a box, and then she placed her hand on the blue circle. The box confirmed her identification number and identity. Now that she had found it, all she had to do was return. Suddenly, she felt something different in the air. She looked back to observe. She remembered what Jaryong had told her, to run away because she needed to be okay. That was the only way they would get money. Now, she was thinking that nothing would change even if she fled. The effort to believe in those words was enormous. In her mind, only the weirdo's face appeared. Surely he wouldn't fight if he didn't know a way to escape. Now, she contemplated the choices she could make. The weirdo used to enjoy bullying at school. It was one of his favorite pastimes. Indeed, he was a genius. Since childhood, he had felt that everything in his life would be easy because he was obviously very talented. Recognition from adults was merely a consequence, just like being the dominant figure among his peers. But there was a complication, a goal he hadn't achieved. He had been rejected by the warrior school. As consolation, he believed that they made political decisions favoring money over talent. For him, it was the only possible explanation, because if it were based on talent and skill alone, there was no way he wouldn't have been accepted. In a test of perseverance, he had ranked first compared to the average young person. He wasn't just a genius, he was well above them. Once again, he had ranked highly, something that didn't even surprise his classmates. But he liked knowing that he had become a topic of conversation. Now, they were facing the last task before graduation. After the ceremony, someone appeared. The headmaster congratulated him and said he would be an excellent adventurer. As advice, he told him not to become conceited and to always keep moving forward. Listening to this, he only thought that in front of him was trash who had retired early and now had a mediocre job. He was determined to rub it in his face that he would reach a place in life that people like the headmaster could only dream of. Now, he was lying on the dungeon floor, terrified. The one who rescued him said he had come quickly because he thought the situation was dangerous. but he hadn't expected it to be such a weak monster. That very monster had killed his entire team without difficulty. They weren't a match for reality. The adventurer looked at him with a gaze that was familiar to him. It was the same one he used to give to other people. It was at that moment that he realized the old man's words weren't advice. They were words of comfort about his future. He wasn't one of the chosen. He was just better than the average person. The mediocre looked up to him, but he was only slightly better than them. That jacket was made entirely from a living vampire, and he allowed all his blood to flow to his heart. That was the price he paid to kill the boy. In response, he asked if he was sure about that, because this little trick seemed like it would give him a hangover. But the weirdo advanced without hesitation. The force of the impact was violent. Despite the change, his speed hadn't increased much, just his appearance, which was horrifying. The attacks were strong and unpredictable. To the boy's surprise, the weirdo's arm was now stretching. Of all the unexpected things that had happened that day, this was yet another one. Blood dripped onto the ground. The weirdo looked at his victim, who was panting. His stance was defensive, but he was worn out. Somehow, he had managed to block the attack. Indeed, good reaction speed and plenty of talent. The weirdo wanted to know why he had become a smuggler, but the boy didn't understand the question. Opening his mouth, he asked, "Well, was that sudden compliment because whatever I did with my life wasn't your business?" Regardless of the answer, the weirdo thought to himself, "Thanks to the boy, now I'll be able to step on a talented person." Excited, he prepared to fulfill his dream. However, the boy wasn't going to let that happen so easily. Despite the damage he had taken, his body moved without any problem. Seeing this, the weirdo became even more excited and wanted him to show even more talent. The boy knew this horrible form couldn't be maintained for long. If his fuel was blood, it was obvious there would be a limit someday. So, he provoked him to use even more blood, hoping to force him to use the needle. But the weirdo was already aware of what could happen. Now, it was too late for the boy. The weirdo was about to land another blow when, unexpectedly, a blazing explosion occurred on his shoulder. The boy looked to the side to see what had happened. His friend had returned to help him. Smiling at her, he hadn't imagined that would happen. Really, she never listens to anything he says, but that behavior of hers was touching at times. With the weirdo within range of his staff, he struck him once again. The place was now filled with rubble. The emptiness was filled only by a thin mist. On the ground lay the weirdo's body, though they still didn't know if he was truly dead. But the boy didn't think that had been enough for that outcome. He told them enough to worry about it, with a picture of him. He certainly wouldn't attempt revenge or risk his entire career. He was sure that would be enough for now. Picking up his staff from the ground, he asked if she had already forgotten he had saved her life. So, he said, "This makes 2 times now. Once at the beginning and the second when you decided to follow me. But since I'm a generous person, I'll only count it as 1. Annoyed, the girl wanted to know if it hurt him to say sorry. In the building's parking lot, the destruction was complete. From a hole in the ground, golden light emanated. They looked at it in the light as well. Surely, it must be something interesting. Descending the stairs, they got closer and closer to the source of the glow. As they approached, they began to smell something sweet in the air. Near the bottom of the staircase, they could observe better. There was a body on the ground, and in its lap, a briefcase. Apparently, the golden glow they had seen from outside was coming from it. He cautiously approached the body in front of it. He closed his eyes as if paying respects. Looking at the girl, he said he had already warned her about the things she would see, but she had followed him anyway. Since they were already there, they decided to take a look inside the briefcase. Placing his hands on it, he began to open it. The smell they were experiencing was beyond their ability to describe, sweet and captivating. It almost invited those who smelled it to forget what they were thinking. Exposed like that, it was surely attracting monsters to the place. Looking at the object beside it, he wondered if there was royal jelly in that bag too. His gut told him they should leave soon because weird things might happen if they stayed too long. As they exited, they quickly made it to the first floor. The murderer's body was no longer there. If alive, he must have escaped. A scream echoed, startling her. He said they should wait for what was to come. He remembered each of their faces well, and from then on, he would do everything possible to destroy them. No, make sure they regretted what was done to him that day. The weirdo ran with hatred in his eyes, but soon realized that life is full of surprises. In front of him was a monster so hungry it had already leaped toward him with its mouth wide open. This wasn't the end he had expected. With no way to react, he ended up becoming monster food. His revenge would have to wait for another life. Maybe if he's reborn as an ice giant. Not even the kids who had spared him expected his karma to be paid so quickly. Perhaps it would be better for them to leave through the back door. Outside, the sun began to set on the horizon. After walking for a while, he imagined they must be safe. Now, looking at the girl, he asked about her test. But it seemed she still had time. He extended his hand to say goodbye, mentioning that it was great to have met her, even though both had already completed their purposes together. A sincere smile appeared on her face, and they shook hands, both content with what they had accomplished. As they were leaving, he reminded her about secrecy and payment, advising her to be careful in case she didn't want to see him again. However, there was something she wanted to ask. She wanted to know if it was okay for them to see each other again. Discarded wrappers were on the ground, and Ewan looked to the side, intrigued. The boy had returned, and from his torn clothes, it seemed he had been having quite a bit of fun. Now, they wanted to take a look inside the briefcase as well. A characteristic glow began to emerge. If that were released to the public, it would be enough to buy a few buildings. Ewan congratulated the boy on the job and said he would send the payment soon. Smoking his cigarette, he looked at him once again. Jaryong seemed strange, so Ewan wanted to know if everything was okay with him. He asked if it was because of the adventurer who had died while fighting him, but the adventurer had died afterward and wasn't in a situation he should feel remorse about. Ewan asked if anything else had happened while he was there. The boy dodged the question, saying it was nothing and that Ewan should stop asking. Looking at the briefcase, Ewan asked if he could take what was left, as it didn't seem to be royal jelly. Of course, all items that weren't part of the objective belonged to the smuggler. That was the rule. Ewan wanted to know who the child that would eat it was. It could bring the dead back, but it had another use. Besides resurrection, it could boost an individual's potential, increasing their talent. There wasn't much clarity on it, but it only worked on those who hadn't reached adulthood, so it wouldn't work on someone who had already matured. It was surely for someone from the warrior school. Jaryong said he was leaving, and Ewan wished him good luck. He sent a message to give to her father, asking him to say hello. The boy said he would if he got the chance. Recently, he hadn't been doing well outside. He looked at the color of the twilight sky and thought about the warrior school. He remembered what the girl had said to him directly. He wanted to know if she was interested in him, but she had told him she wasn't joking. There was an admission exam in the winter, and they accepted only a few people, but he had a good chance of getting in. Looking at him, she emphasized that he should try. No adventurer can explore a dungeon alone, no matter how skilled they are. Facing the unreal situations in dungeons alone is practically impossible. That's why a team is necessary. Different people with different talents combine their abilities to overcome weaknesses and become stronger. That's how dungeons are explored. The school had political factions, and he wanted to know if they fought against each other. If it were that simple, they wouldn't have to worry about them. In their class, there were 2 factions. The 2 in the top 3 led the factions. Hearing this, he wanted to know if she belonged to one. He found out that she hadn't joined them. Regarding the situation, the teachers didn't interfere because it was the students' responsibility to form their own teams. She knew he was implying this happened because she wasn't that skilled, and she also knew she wouldn't be a top student. Even so, she believed she could manage to find a team if even those non-action students could do it. One of the faction leaders didn't like her. It wasn't explicit, but it was noticeable. Behind her back, they intentionally isolated her from the others. Jaryong wanted to know if she had stolen that girl's boyfriend. But of course, that wasn't the reason. In any case, she had survived alone so far, but she wouldn't be able to do so in the upcoming years. That's why she wanted to hire Jaryong. With his ability, or rather, with him alone, she might have a chance to survive. Thinking about this, she looked at the medicines on the counter. Indeed, she was quite a funny girl. The girl sighed, exhausted after a turbulent day. She finally arrived at her destination and announced her presence. She was at the dungeon barrier in Gangnam, at the 12th location. Meanwhile, she thought about the boy she had met. As she was leaving, he had said he had listened well to what she said and wished her good luck. In her mind, she imagined he wouldn't talk to her about the subject again. While she was thinking, someone said she wasn't late. It was Kang, one of her instructors responsible for hand-to-hand combat training. Kang wanted to know if something had happened, since she still had time. He said there had been a problem. Monsters, not common in certain areas, had been seen. There were no casualties, but some students had said completing the test was impossible and requested help. These students were in the same area where she had retrieved the coin. Looking at her, Kang wanted to know if she had had any trouble. She said she hadn't. He listened without reacting and didn't question her further. However, he ordered her to stay behind him. The girl felt a monstrous presence and turned to him, becoming even more frightened. Another one like the creature that ate the weirdo, but even larger. A titan ape in that area was unusual since they didn't live anywhere nearby. Maybe it had been attracted by something, and the girl began to imagine what it could have been. It was certainly the smell she had sensed earlier. The instructor told her once again to stay behind him, and she apologized. The monster was completely focused on eating them all. The instructors at this school were once adventurers, some having left the profession due to lingering injuries sustained throughout their lives. That's what people on the outside thought of them. A single punch from the instructor was devastating. The force was so immense that the Titan ape was subdued. Fire rapidly rose up the instructor's arm, and as soon as it reached the head, the ape was obliterated. The monster's lifeless body fell to the ground. The instructor's prosthetic had been destroyed, and he said the girl was lucky he was there because this could have ended very dangerously. Even so, he rested his hand on her shoulder, reassuring her. It was good to know she was safe. Now, it was time to return to a safe place. People sometimes ignored the fact that the instructors were also warriors. Back at school, they asked about the students who had requested rescue. Those students would have to retake the test, which was very fortunate. The instructor said the people who had gone there were just weaklings. As they talked, he pointed out one of the weaklings was arriving. Looking at her, the one-armed man told her to go in and wait. She was to confirm that everyone was there and check the numbers on the uniform. Indeed, she felt much more relieved now. A girl said she had told her she would be fine. At least her tactic had been quick. This girl, Anisha, said she was very worried about her classmate. In response, the girl said she didn't imagine Anisha would be worried. Continuing with the cynicism, she added it wasn't for her. It was her sister saying those things. It all started 6 years ago. Zeke Jin's uncle had said she needed to increase her output. She should pay attention and stay focused. But that required too much effort. He finished the exercise, saying that was enough and that at least she had improved since the last time, but only a little. On the other side, she heard someone cheering. Exhausted, she looked to see what was happening. It was her sister, showing much more talent. Anisha had mastered the technique with ease. Not only did she not resemble a hybrid in appearance, but she could use magic with more mastery than many purebloods. Her cousin was a genius, and if she wanted to stay on this path, she would always remain in her shadow and be constantly compared. That should be the least of her worries. He also suggested she be cautious, as the girl seemed sadistic and cynical. She said she didn't understand why no one wanted to be on the same team as her, with the ability she had. Anisha interrupted her and said if she was curious, she should form a team with her. The girl said she couldn't, as they both had the same role, dealing magical damage from a distance. It didn't make sense for two people to have the same task. This was a situation others should deal with, not her. But even so, Anisha reassured her not to worry because there would be another test. She said she didn't care about the test because she had already passed. Anisha said she was impressed and that her sister must have done her best. However, she advised her not to try too hard. After all, she was the one who had to inherit the company. This brief interaction left her deeply irritated. What Anisha really wanted was for her to stop trying. It was already nighttime, and the lights were visible in the building. The door suddenly opened, and Jaryong, very agitated, saw that the patient's guardian had arrived. He wanted to know if something had gone wrong. Unfortunately, his father had suffered a relapse. The doctors didn't know how else to explain it. This patient had an extremely rare condition, possibly the only person in the world with it. There was no record in medical literature of anyone else being poisoned by dragon's blood and surviving. Jaryong knew the best they could do was palliative care to reduce his father's pain, nothing more. But that wasn't the only problem. The ingredients for the painkillers were also an issue. The milk of an extremely dangerous monster was the only thing that could relieve the pain at this stage. The flying tiger, a 5-star danger level monster. He said he had money, but the doctor was categorical in stating that the problem wasn't the money. There was a new potion, popular among adventurers, which increased strength and endurance for a long time even in small doses. One of its ingredients was the milk of this beast. This ingredient had once been considered useless and could be bought with money, but things had changed. Now, companies and adventurers were buying large quantities of it. Jaryong was furious that they didn't even have a little to save a person who was dying. But the doctor said that wasn't the issue. The amount needed was the same as what was used to make 10 of those potions. If there were enough patients who needed it, the government might intervene. But since there was only one in the entire world, that wasn't going to happen, as there was no public health system like the one in Korea. They would do what they could, but without the ingredient, there wasn't much that could be done. After this devastating news, he sat on a park bench, deep in thought. Life seemed to be getting more and more complicated. He took out his phone to call someone. It was the girl he had met earlier. He asked if it was too late to call, but she said it was fine. Directly, he said that he didn't have many options left, besides accepting her offer. Hearing this, she wanted to know if she had any conditions. After listening, she said she could take a look and that things might work out that way. He was still incredulous that she could pull this off, but she said yes. It was her company that made that potion, and since he didn't need much, it was an achievable request. He hadn't expected to hear that, but he was happy if that was the case. It seemed they had a verbal agreement. She reminded him that he needed to prepare for the admission exam, saying there was nothing to lose by preparing ahead of time. The next day, he went to the company's headquarters building. She said he had arrived early. As he approached, she asked how he was feeling, and he said he was fine. Jaryong wanted to know what they were going to do there. She said they were going to measure his potential. the world had changed a lot. And before that, an ordinary human could only reach level D. Those who reached level C were considered geniuses, and anything above B was beyond human, excluding magic. You needed to be at least C in 5 categories to become an explorer. To go to the warrior school, you needed to be B in at least 3 of them. Jaryong wanted to know if they were just going to do a physical test on him. They gave out with children, but after puberty, it was a bit more complex. He wanted to know what made it more complicated. Dressed in an exotic suit, he found out why it got more complicated. It should have clicked when she asked him how he was feeling. In front of him was a battle robot. Since they were there, he was interested in doing his best because he was curious to find out what his potential was. Jaryong prepared to fight the robot. A blue light began to emerge from the dummy, just as smoke started to come out of it. The girl watched, impressed by this start. With her was another woman who said he was brave. Most people got scared of the golem. This was Young, a golem specialist, and she was curious about the determination of the boy who wanted to transfer. She smiled discreetly as she knew that wasn't quite the case. Placing her cup on the table after drinking her coffee, it was time to begin the aptitude test. The golem's pieces started moving, preparing to attack the person in front of it. Jaryong was not intimidated by it at all. This test usually took place between the 6th and 7th year, and the suit was used to ensure the data was collected with precision. This way, the body could be pushed to its limit in several areas, but it's difficult to measure whether they were truly talented or if they simply trained for a long time. She knew Jaryong was physically gifted. It wouldn't be easy to push him to his limit. Even so, he should be tired by now. The other woman called out to Jin, wanting to confirm if this boy really failed the admission to a specialized school. She was very curious. He must have failed something truly difficult, even with reduced difficulty. That model was used to train professionals. With a few dodges, he identified a pattern and found an opening to strike. He was simply insane with his abilities. Just with his senses, he was already better than the average professional. Jin wanted to know the result of the measurement. It was a bit more complicated because he clearly hadn't reached his limit yet. It was necessary to increase the difficulty of the test, but it didn't make sense to increase it by just 1 or 2 levels. It needed to be pushed to full strength. She wanted to know if Jin was aware of the risk. It was a crime to do this with unregistered professionals, but if they didn't, there was no way to know his limits. She tried to think of a possibility as she entered the room. Someone said she wasn't paid to do this kind of thing. She turned, startled, to see who had just arrived. It was the director, Zeke, who said the lab couldn't be used without reporting the reason. Jin saw her uncle. They hadn't expected him to come here on a Sunday. He said he hoped there was a reason she was willing to get arrested for. Jin said she was solely responsible, as it was her who requested this. Zeke wanted to know if it was really her or if it was just an excuse to cover for her employee. Jin shouldn't confuse herself. This place belonged to her father, not her. There was nothing she could do to take responsibility for herself. The rumors about the director were indeed true. He was her maternal uncle and had always been cold toward her, even though she had done nothing wrong. It was the weekend, and other adventurers tied to the company also used this place. He was about to continue his lecture when Jaryong spoke through the intercom. He wanted to know if there was a problem. Zeke wanted to know who that was and if he was on her level. The employee said he was a friend of Jin's. She explained that he had failed the admission exams and lost his potential registration, which was why he was here. Since it was costly, she just wanted to help a friend who couldn't afford it. Zeke looked at the golem, which seemed to have taken a beating. Thinking about what he just saw, he said he would handle it. The employee wanted to know what he meant by that. He had heard that the golem wasn't enough and couldn't be taken out of safe mode. So, Zeke was going to go down and face this friend himself. Jaryong still didn't know if everything was okay. It wasn't uncommon for adventurers to get into conflicts with each other when it was difficult to find someone's limits. And in this particular case, the opponent was several levels above the one taking the test. Zeke said he'd skip the introduction because he didn't have much time to spare. Jaryong quickly realized that the guy was definitely not normal. He had no idea who he was about to face, but his senses immediately went on high alert. Zeke told him to do his best. But the weirdo from before had been the first person he fought. No matter how he looked at him, he felt he wasn't a beatable opponent. Hearing the order to attack, he hesitated. He didn't need to worry about Zeke's safety, so Jaryong began planning his attack. He started channeling aura and finally initiated his charge. Zeke stood still, waiting for contact. Despite appearances, Zeke was the 7th strongest ranker in all of Korea, a white-class adventurer. Jaryong couldn't identify a single opening, but he wouldn't give up. He was going to create the opportunity. His combat strategy was simple. As soon as his opponent dodged, he would execute a single attack from behind, using the opening created by the dodge. His staff was blocked with a single hand. That wasn't the result he was aiming for. Zeke is really strong. He remarked that this kid is even more reckless than he had initially imagined. With Jaryong in front of him, Zeke struck him with a single kick. Jaryong felt the brutal impact as his body was hurled toward the wall. However, he couldn't understand one thing: whether Zeke attacked that way because he knew it was a simulation, or if he actually thought it would work. It doesn't matter what the answer is, the choice is foolish in both cases. With his foot, Zeke kicked the staff back into his hands. Even though Jaryong was still conscious, he had lost the only weapon he had. This made Jaryong more alert, and it made sense. Zeke returned the staff to him. So far, Zeke had been lenient with the boy's foolish choices. One more mistake, and Zeke promised he would make Jaryong regret ever becoming an adventurer. He spread his feet, assuming an offensive stance. Jaryong didn't know exactly why, but he sensed that Zeke held some kind of grudge against him. However, he wouldn't take it personally and moved forward again to attack. Zeke assumed that since the approach was similar to the previous one, it would follow the same pattern. However, Jaryong planted one of his feet firmly on the ground, which made Zeke extremely alert. 2 attacks were coming his way, one a ranged attack to catch him off guard. Still not satisfied, Jaryong said that this guy probably wasn't satisfied yet, which was good because he had just begun. His staff was now glowing with a bright blue light as he prepared to execute a powerful attack. Zeke still didn't know what to expect from the boy. Once again, a series of attacks came his way. Exhaling some of his aura, Zeke said it wasn't bad at all, and clenched his fists tightly, poised. He managed to defend against all the incoming attacks from above. The employee observed the fight, thinking it looked like a battle between 2 professionals. Given the technical level of the fight, it was hard to believe that this boy hadn't been accepted into any school yet. To be honest, it wasn't like he was perfect at everything. Jin wanted to know what she meant by that. He has a weakness that hinders him a lot, she said, in that same aspect. Jin is far superior to him. Jin wondered what that could be because, apparently, he was fighting Zeke on equal footing. Now, she was curious to know what was wrong with him. Jaryong narrowly avoided a blow, the punch nearly hitting his unprotected face. The employee started watching the fight with concern. Jaryong had lost any advantage and was being struck repeatedly. He was in agony, unable to react quickly enough to block the attacks, but he mustered all his determination to fight back. He swung his staff in a way that pushed his opponent back. Zeke commented that Jaryong had managed to maintain control of the staff at the last moment. That was certainly true. Zeke's fist sank into the boy's abdomen once again, and Jaryong was thrown toward the wall. The director was truly exceptional, and she knew Zeke was still holding back. Jin watched the fight closely. Zeke told Jaryong not to dwell on defeat, as it would have happened either way. But his journey to accepting defeat was pitiful. Jaryong lacked basic training. This was the same opinion the employee had about him. His talent and reflexes were indeed exceptional, but the fundamentals were missing. It was as if he had never trained in his life. She felt disappointed, thinking that if he had been trained in the basics, his potential would have been immense. Jin remembered that Jaryong had told her he had never been taught by anyone. Zeke said he had seen many people like him, talented, but they don't dedicate themselves to refining what they already possess. However, Jin knew that wasn't the case with him. Zeke gave him some credit for that but strongly suggested that Jaryong give up. Someone as weak as him could end up dead if he relied only on talent. Standing up, Jaryong said that Zeke had no idea about something. "You've been talking so much nonsense," he said. "It's like you hate me for thinking I'm lazy." Zeke was surprised because he had intended for his last strike to end the fight. Jaryong said he didn't care about the results but wanted to go for one more round. Now he would show Zeke the result of his hard work. The employee asked what was going on with them. She found it amusing that they wanted to continue fighting, but they already had enough data to calculate his potential. Even Jin tried to intervene, saying it wasn't necessary to keep going. He could stop now and check his results. Zeke said that he didn't know what Jaryong intended to do, but no matter what he did, the result would always be the same. He even thought that the boy wanted words of affirmation from him. To be frank, that wasn't quite what Jaryong was seeking. Jaryong was really irritated, and all he wanted right now was to beat up this arrogant elf. With no one to teach him, he had to learn everything from scratch in his own way. Even so, things weren't that bad. He really had natural talent, and that's how he managed to fill the gaps that basic training would have taught him. Besides, he had vast field experience that made him capable of doing whatever he wanted. His exceptional progress never crossed his mind as being better than others. In fact, he was often disappointed by the frauds who, in the end, were weaker than him. But that elf over there was different from everyone else. Zeke now wanted to hit him so hard that the boy wouldn't even feel anger. He was a monster beyond Jaryong's reach. Seeing the aura being exhaled, he noticed something. Now Jaryong was really being taken seriously by the elf. When faced with someone he considered a real challenge, his blood started boiling without him noticing. Watching the scene, the employee said, "This is madness," and didn't know why the director was like that. Jin noticed that Jaryong's base was different from before. His posture and weight distribution were a little more aggressive now. They were two completely different people from before. Jaryong calmly sighed after preparing himself and initiated his attack. This time, things would be different. He executed his first strike, which was intense. Even though Zeke dodged, his cheek was superficially cut. Not even the employee could believe what she was seeing. Jaryong was really attacking in a different way. However, even so, Zeke continued to dodge everything. Compared to before, the movements were still simple and rough, but there were no more openings. She didn't know who had taught him, but that was simply phenomenal. All Jaryong wanted now was to beat this elf. He remembered who he used to observe when he was a child. Everything that man did, he imitated as best as he could. Tired of dodging, Zeke caught the staff with one of his hands and began his counterattack, which the boy defended. When he was just a little Jaryong, he happily imitated. Now, he was facing the strongest opponent he'd ever encountered. Zeke definitely wanted to beat him up too. He found the little child's dedication interesting. This time, Zeke landed a hit, and he looked somewhat intrigued by that tiny being. Jaryong narrowly dodged the attack, and the little boy seemed quite interested in it. Now, he wielded his staff to deliver a counterattack, eagerly waiting to see what would happen. Jaryong was fully confident in his abilities. The man just patted his little head and looked at him full of admiration. That attack would have been devastating if it had hit. Zeke had to jump. As soon as he landed, there would be an opening. He knew that if Jaryong struck, he wouldn't be able to dodge. But he was determined to give him what he had been seeking in this fight. Since he couldn't dodge, he went straight for the boy. They watched, too impressed with what was happening. Smoke rose in the arena. That was the final blow. If Jaryong hadn't used this bizarre staff technique, he would certainly have won if he had continued. Zeke wanted to know if this was a display of pride on his part. Smiling, Jaryong said, "It's not. I simply only knew that much. That's all I had memorized." In the end, he just ended up taking an even worse beating. Even so, that wasn't bad at all. Zeke was not very well liked among his peers because he was annoying. But no one could complain about his actions because his skills were truly powerful. Extending his hand over Jaryong's face, he prepared to do something. The aura began to gently increase in response to his niece's concern. He told her not to worry, the boy would be fine. He had just healed his wounds. He wanted to confirm with her if the boy's name was Yu Jaryong. Zeke was one of the top 10 rankers in the whole country, and he didn't expect something like this that day. Who would have thought he'd meet the son of that guy here? Zeke was the greatest healer in Korea. The sun finally begins to set, and someone tells Zeke that if he was going to be late, he could have at least sent a message. They could have had a coffee and relaxed, but now they'll be late for the briefing again. Every time they're late, people always think it's his fault. Zeke explains that something happened, and it took longer than expected. The young man, hearing that Zeke was dueling with a boy, remarks that it must have been several boys, given the delay. Upon looking closely, he's surprised to see a small mark on Zeke's cheek. He asks if it's a cut, and Zeke impatiently confirms that it is. Zeke further explains that the boy must be around 16. But he turns out to be 17, planning to enter the warrior school during winter admissions. However, no one has passed the school's entrance in the last 3 years, and it seems the boy has no chance. Zeke mentions that cutting his cheek isn't an easy feat, and that the new generation is increasingly terrifying. The young man compares himself to the boy, claiming he has the upper hand in both talent and experience. Having graduated a year and a half ago and ranking 19th as the Black Class Explorer leader of the Nyx attack squad, Zeke sighs and says he hasn't seen that car yet. The young man clarifies that he doesn't spend much money, so he allows himself certain privileges. Meanwhile, Jaryong lies on a stretcher, noticing that all his wounds have been healed and he feels no pain. The girl, who has been looking after him, asks if he really thought he could win. Jaryong explains that he was just angry, but it was the other guy who started it. The girl mentions that her uncle, Zeke, is the one who fought him, and Jaryong is surprised to hear they are related. She confirms that Zeke is her uncle on her mother's side. Jaryong doesn't take this personally, but does notice the concern Zeke has for his niece. Jaryong smiles, realizing that Zeke's concern is probably because he doesn't want anyone taking advantage of her, though she reassures him that her uncle isn't that type of person, just very strict. A staff member enters, noticing Jaryong is awake, and asks if he feels any pain. Jaryong confirms that his body is fine. The staff member mentions that Zeke is the greatest healer in the country, which surprises Jaryong. Combat isn't his primary role, but his healing skills are exceptional. The staff member shows Jaryong the evaluation results, noting that his stats are impressive. His stamina and agility are rated B, strength and endurance are C, and intelligence is also C. The staff member explains that to be a high-level explorer, one needs balanced stats, not just raw power. Jaryong is surprised but not disappointed, noting that he has someone in mind who is far superior to him. The staff member, intrigued, wonders who this person is and suggests that Jaryong is talking about a famous person. Jaryong mentions Jin, who is indeed known, although not widely. The staff member suggests they visit the medicine production section. Though Jin hesitates, unsure if Zeke would approve, she's told that Zeke has already authorized it. In fact, he's insisted that Jaryong should be given whatever he needs, even a weapon made to adapt to him. Jaryong is confused, as he thought equipment would be provided by the school, but Jin explains that it's not the case with the warrior school. They require students to bring their own equipment, as obtaining good gear is a skill in itself. Having resources and good equipment is beneficial, but talent and skill are the primary criteria. Jaryong points out that this could favor the wealthy, but the staff member explains that those with potential can attract sponsors. She herself received a scholarship from the Jinsong group, guaranteeing a job upon graduation. The staff member tells Jaryong that entering the school opens doors to opportunities, and what matters is proving his worth among his peers. However, the first step for him is to pass the test. The transfer exam is more difficult than the mission one, and he needs to prepare. Obtaining equipment is one of the things that need to be done. That's why the director wanted to help him with that, since she has already passed the details along. He just needs to go to the refinery in the basement. She wished him luck and hoped he could get admitted to the school. Things could have ended badly. Jin wants to know how, and he says she didn't imagine her uncle would help. The more he hears about the test, the more it seems like people will do anything to pass. That's why she wants to help him, using her own money to do so. Every time she sees that expression on his face, she gets extremely irritated. Even so, it was good to hear that no matter how much money someone has, it's also important to know who's going to make the equipment, and the equipment production sector of this company is one of the best in the world. Arriving at the forge, he says there shouldn't be much difference between one piece of equipment and another, but what he's seeing makes him think differently. The forge is simply immense. It used to be a dungeon called the Bubbling Abyss. Jin wants to know what he thinks of all this. That's not a place where you can simply ask for something to be made. A chill runs down his spine as he stands there. A massive figure is behind them both, and on its face, a huge eye glows. The boy immediately turns, ready to react to the situation. The figure says that Zeke woke him up from his weekend nap, and yet he doesn't even personally come to the forge. Jaryong asks if this is a monster, but Jin says it's not. Actually, he's the head of the equipment production division. In truth, the boy isn't entirely wrong either. He's an ancient titan called Arges, and from a human perspective, he's a monster, but he obtained naturalization in Korea through a special rite. Lighting his cigar, he asks who the human Zeke talked about is. He wants to know if it's this little boy in front of him or if it's the elfsmith, but she says the information has already been passed on to him. He says that digital information is a human thing and he doesn't care about it. His employees are in charge of that, but today is a day off and none of them are around. Even so, that's not important at all since he was asked to take care of this personally. It's time to get to work. Then he asks if the weapon the boy carries is his main one. Jaryong says yes. If that's the case, Arges just orders him to try to hunt him. Jin becomes anxious and wants to know what he intends to do with this. For his species, this is necessary, unless the boy proves worthy. He won't put any effort into the task. Even so, Arges says the boy seems different from others he's seen. His eyes are ready and accustomed to hunting, and he has a sense of hostility that can still be refined. Once again, he tells the boy to try and give him a beating. Jin remains anxious about the situation, seeing that Jaryong was preparing himself. She tells Arges that he usually doesn't turn down challenges like that. Immediately, his eye widens. The boy is already engaging and attacking him. The staff is wielded with mastery, striking him with force. Jin watches the beginning of the fight apprehensively. The cigar falls to the ground after the impact. Arges says that's simply impossible, having suffered no damage. He wants to know where the boy got that weapon. That reaction left Jaryong confused. It was sure the hand had been clean. Indeed, there are many monsters he couldn't take down with just one blow, but the feeling he had when he struck this one was like hitting a huge wall. It's not just about strength, it was like hitting an inanimate object. Intrigued, he wants to know what kind of monster he just hit. There's another reason Jin is so worried and distressed. Monsters are given danger classifications designated by stars. 1 star means they are capable of killing humans, and monsters in this range can be defeated by a normal person as long as they are armed. With 2 stars, the difficulty rises considerably. They can be defeated by trained people equipped with firearms. Things get much harder with 3 stars. They can only be defeated by armed troops with heavy equipment. With 4 stars, the situation becomes catastrophic. Ground troops focus on evacuating civilians and minimizing casualties. After the evacuation, they are destroyed with artillery and bombs. That's the limit of what the military can handle. Anything above 5 stars is beyond modern military capability. Even if they defeat such a monster, it will be at the cost of massive firepower and nearly irreparable destruction. To reduce the damage, elite squads of the best explorers are sent to deal with these monsters. Arges is a 7-star monster, and once again he asks his question. He wants to know where the boy got that weapon. Jaryong wants to know if it hurt him more than it should have and doesn't understand why there are so many questions. Arges says it's good for the boy to think very carefully about the answer he's going to give because it was he who made that staff. Hearing that, Jaryong was surprised. Now irritated, Arges just says he would ask only once more. He wants to know why this weapon is in Jin's hands and not in the hands of the person it was made for. If it was made by Arges, that weapon alone is ranked above A, and it should be cataloged in the association along with the owner's data and exact location. It's not an item a smuggler could easily get their hands on. Jin doesn't want to believe that he might have stolen the item. Jaryong says he's not going to tell, and besides, he has no reason to answer. Jin says he's being really stupid, and Arges says he understands and now will take that into account. Immediately, only one thought was running through his mind: death. There was no way to dodge that, and he had no idea how to block the attack. There was no apparent weakness in the hand of that monster. If he tried to absorb the blow, he would end up dead anyway. His only option was the third choice, the last technique he learned by watching his father. The Titan noticed that something was happening. Even so, he carried out his attack, striking the ground. When two forces collide, the larger and stronger one always wins. But the outcome is different if they are not directly opposing each other. By precisely calculating the angle and position, even though winning wasn't a possibility, it's possible to redirect the resulting force. Jin can't believe he managed to dodge an attack from a 7-star monster. The Titan waits for the next move. His only chance now is to use the needle to strike the monster's single eye. However, before he can even get close, he's caught by the giant's prosthetic hand, which now pulls him closer to its face. He's firmly trapped and can't move. Jin pleads for him to stop, saying the boy may seem suspicious, but she says he still doesn't have the right to attack a human and should be aware of the consequences, except in dangerous situations. Now, naturalized species cannot attack humans. If that happens, the aggressor loses their rights and is treated as a hostile monster. Releasing the boy, Arges says she shouldn't worry. He understands that clearly. Despite everything, he finally realized why the boy has the weapon. He made that. That's why Zeke woke him from his weekend nap. Faced with that, he apologized and said the boy has every right to carry that weapon and that he'll make sure to pay him back for his mistake. Then he noticed something with his single eye. It's been 30 years since he was last hurt by an attack. Stum doesn't know what he's talking about because she didn't understand what happened. He asks if they know why he works for humans now. She thinks it's because he was hunted by the attack squad 30 years ago, but he says that's not it. He's surprised. That's the story humans tell, as they weren't even able to touch him. The one who hunted him was a man who did it alone. He was the one who cut off his hand and had the chance to take his life but chose mercy. As he says this, the boy is watching him. Likewise, he looks back at the boy. Arges has always been an incredibly powerful monster. He was ready to fight against that hunter. In his hands was a battle axe. It was the boy's father who hunted him. The ancient titans are the strongest among the giants. They have an unknown life expectancy, and fewer than 10 of them are known. Their physical abilities are beyond human comprehension, but they are widely known for their skill in forging equipment, which have special powers or even artifacts. This is the skill they are born with. The closest to this are the dwarves. Unlike the titans, the dwarves chose to coexist with humans. The titans, besides not opting for that, saw humans as unworthy. Something happened 30 years ago during Arges' subjugation at the door of his forge. It was an automaton called Colossus, a 4-star monster. They want to know if the communication channel with the base is still down. All magical communication is cut off. There must be something blocking the signal. Terrified, someone says he's coming, and they should prepare for impact. The Colossus attacks the invaders without any mercy. The shield bearer tries to hold back the blow with all his strength. Behind the automaton, the girl prepares to deliver her attack. She needs to seize this opening before it's too late. Her strike is precise, but it's deflected by the helmet. That wasn't the result she was looking for. Her sword was completely ineffective in penetrating the armor's defense. Faced with that, the automaton prepares to retaliate. Then it hits her with its shield. She flies several meters before crashing into the wall of the place. Everything was completely beyond what they had imagined. Kibyuk's attack squad was known for being one of the best in dungeon subjugation. However, in the bubbling abyss, they were completely obliterated. Having already faced 7 colossi, they found themselves in a perilous situation. Even if they defeated one, another would appear immediately after. The shield bearer, aware of the dire circumstances, ordered his companions to flee, knowing it would be difficult for all of them to leave alive. As he spoke, the automaton struck again with its sword, but the young man quickly raised his shield to defend himself. His ability allowed him to consume energy to enhance all his physical attributes. After activation, the user becomes incapacitated for a while. With the sword parried against his shield, he used another ability, Push, which caused the automaton to lose its balance. The young man knew that if his leader used his ability now, they would be in serious trouble. But the leader had already said they wouldn't all make it out alive, and they didn't have the strength to defeat the monster. However, it was enough to buy them some time. He remained optimistic, hoping for a chance of luck. Then, an overwhelming presence was felt. Arges, observing from his forge, wondered what was happening. At that moment, the squad realized they were doomed. Arges was a titan, and just his presence instilled an intense terror. The leader, with what little strength he had left, charged toward Arges, determined to buy more time. But with a single blow, Arges incinerated him completely. There was nothing more he could do. Arges was certain that they were inferior to him. Both their bodies and their equipment were trash, ruled by inferior beings. This world, he believed, was destined for ruin. Intrigued, Arges observed the one who remained, a mage wielding a staff, trembling but still loyal, even in fear. It didn't mean much to him, though. The boy knew he couldn't deal with a monster that even the leader couldn't handle. Just then, a man appeared, saying he had already warned them that the place wasn't safe. If they had gathered information gradually, they would have been better prepared. He explained that clearing a dungeon just for the sake of it was a poor strategy. The boy didn't know who this man was. The association had received the distress call, and this man was a volunteer from the rescue team. Though he was heavily armored, the boy thought he had come alone. The automaton prepared to attack the intruder, but before it could, a loud sound echoed through the forge's corridors. The boy was terrified. The man, unfazed, remarked that the monsters were quite strong. At that time, Yu Xiong was not widely known. He was practically a nobody. Yet, he managed to sever the automaton's arm with ease. First-generation explorers knew of him, but he didn't care for fame. His focus was always on rescuing those in need. That day, however, would mark the beginning of everything. Yu Xiong prepared to finish off the automaton with a single strike. With no difficulty, he split it from top to bottom. This display of power caught Arges' attention. As Yu Xiong faced him, he thought to himself that Arges might prove more difficult. That day, the world learned who Yu Xiong was. The aura of his strike was enough to change the lighting in the dungeon. The mage, stunned, couldn't believe it. The entire team had struggled to deal with a colossus, but this man had taken it down in one move. Yu Xiong asked the mage if he still had any mana left. The mage replied he didn't have much but could still grant a blessing. Yu Xiong declined but asked if he knew any levitation enchantments. If he did, he should use it to take the others out of the dungeon. Though injured, they were still alive. Arges, infuriated by Yu Xiong's confidence, attacked with all his might. However, Yu Xiong skillfully reacted. The aura of their clash reverberated through the dungeon. As they continued, the mage looked back in fear. 10 years after the event, adventurers had reached their physical limits. Superhuman strength and advanced equipment had made them formidable, but despite the progress, there was still a significant lack in execution and experience. The solution lay in human development, creating a martial art that defied logic. Few at the time saw it as a solution, but they began developing and researching techniques. Arges had been struck, but his armor protected him from the first blow. Yu Xiong pressed on, delivering another devastating strike. He was one of the few who had perfected this martial art. The mage thought the monster had been defeated, but his expression soon changed. Arges noted that Yu Xiong was different. He knew how to use his weapons effectively. If the weapon he wielded had withstood half of the strength Arges possessed, the result might have been different. The edge of the blade had melted from the strike. Still, Yu Xiong couldn't afford the best equipment, and it wasn't the first time his axe had suffered the same fate. Turning his attention to those he had come to rescue, Yu Xiong was relieved to see they were almost out of the dungeon. Now, he needed to defend himself against the hostile monster. His flaming sword was blocked by the axe's handle. Arges commented that Yu Xiong's defense and dodging skills were among the best he had ever seen in a human. However, the axe he wielded was the worst weapon Arges had encountered. Despite the axe's shortcomings, Yu Xiong had managed to defend himself well. Arges prepared to strike again, declaring that this would be the end. But that was not what Yu Xiong had in mind. The two blades clashed once more with devastating force. Instead of redirecting Arges' attack, Yu Xiong blocked it with full force. This technique, which would later be known as Jiren, would eventually be learned by Ayla. It used the opponent's strength against them, but Yu Xiong's execution was far superior, strong enough to force Arges to step back. This martial art was the mark of a hero. Arges, after being struck by the boy's father, realized that the monster inside him had died. The life he had was no longer his but was now Song's, who had chosen not to kill him. What the attack squad could not accomplish, a single man from the rescue team had achieved. It was a ridiculous ending to an epic story. Ancient titans, even when defeated, never bowed to those they considered inferior. Still, Arges accepted his exile from humanity. Jin remembered this event well. It was a major turning point, and the whole world was shocked. Eventually, Arges gained citizenship. His decision to spare lives had helped him, but it didn't erase the crimes he had committed. As a form of atonement, he was tasked with forging equipment. Jin learned that the staff the boy carried had been made as a gift for his father, even though his father had never asked for it. Arjis had always known it was solid, but he didn't think it had anything special. The staff had not been pawned because it was thought to be useless. Arjis was right. It was only useful for brute force. Jin was stuck on the idea of pawning it. But Arjis clarified that if the boy's father had used the staff as a weapon, he would have made an axe. Unfortunately, he lost contact with the boy's father and couldn't complete the weapon. Arjis asked to take the incomplete weapon and promised to finish what he started. Not for the father, but for the son. While the Titan works, they return to the upper floors. Jin looks at him, a bit curious about what she had heard. She wants to know how he's feeling now. Despite everything, he's fine and feels that the Titan wants to make sure everything is okay. He doesn't know how long it will take, but he's committed to finishing as quickly as possible. He advises waiting, as masterpieces take time to complete. Since Wednesday is a holiday, she wants to know if he'll have time available. She thought about helping him study for the written test, and he agrees that it would be productive as well. While they were still walking, there was something else she wanted to say. His father must have been an incredible person. She could never have imagined that he was the one who cleared that dungeon. She asked if he's in the hospital to get some rest after retiring. He said he'll go ahead, and if anything comes up, they can talk later. But she didn't get a response to the comment she made. Already in the car, she made her way back home and consulted the internet. She confirmed that the narrative she had learned was not true, but now she's thinking about Arj's words. The team that cleared the dungeon is considered heroic today, all at the cost of another adventurer's deeds. There's no reason for Arjis to have lied about this, but thinking about Jaryong's abilities, it's completely acceptable that his father was someone exceptional. Not to mention, it's hard to know what really happens inside a dungeon, and it often happens that the story told is different from the facts. Seong is known as the False Dragon Slayer. He was once considered one of Korea's greatest, but it was later revealed that everything was just blackmail and false statistics, which he confessed after being injured. There's even an article online debunking his achievements. This left her uncertain about what she had heard and what she was reading. The result of her practical test was now available at the school and the department responsible for dungeons. A staff member thanked Professor Cho and apologized to Kang, who couldn't rest over the weekend because of her. But it's only her first year, and it's important for him to observe the first-year students. She says things are pretty intense there, not only as a teacher, but the freshmen are much more talented than she was at the same stage. Now, she wants to know if he expected the top student to be that particular one. Indeed, it was unexpected, Kang says. That's not an easy result to predict. Jin can't believe the exam results, as there are many geniuses alongside her. Coincidentally, all of them are hybrids. The first is D.F. Choi, who inherited swordsmanship talent from his father, a white class explorer, combined with the magical talent of his elf mother. He is the perfect magic swordsman. In second place is Anisha, who has more mana and magical control than many pure elves, with the potential to become a great mage. Lastly, there is Tur Velkassen, the son of a human and a dwarf. He possesses the strength and resilience of dwarves combined with the flexibility and reflexes of a human, truly the best of both worlds. This is considered to be the best physique on the planet. He is a student at the school, and even so, he must be just as capable as the other two. The top spot should have gone to one of them. Although it's hard to believe, she achieved all this on her own. Perhaps her physicality alone gave her more points. Physicality isn't the only thing that counts. That's why she hopes he will do more, as he has the potential to become a great leader. But from what it seems, he has no interest in connecting with other students. In fact, the students are hesitant to approach him. However, there are limits to how far one can go alone, and by the second year, he will soon realize that. Kang says that's not a problem she should worry about. Sometimes things happen without us noticing, and details can go unnoticed. He knows she cares about all the students, but if she believes in him more than she worries, he'll find a way to resolve things. Since then, 4 days have passed, and the holiday has arrived. A group of boys is gossiping about something a girl did, but one of them ends up bumping into a huge person. He turns around to confront this person, not expecting to come face to face with a figure chiseled like a bodybuilder, lean and ripped, practically spitting sand from his mouth. The champion of the Arnold Classic begins to speak and apologizes, saying he was distracted and didn't see them on the way. The boys are still terrified and apologize, even more intimidated by the man's imposing physique. After the interaction ends, he notices his shirt is dirty and all he can think about is how unlucky he is. The truth is, he misses his mother a lot. Steuben went to Europe, but she was a successful hunter in Korea. She used to tell her son many stories about her time as an explorer, which fostered his admiration for Korea and its culture. Thanks to the opportunity and his natural talent, he entered the warrior school through a special transfer test. Unfortunately, though, he's an extremely introverted boy. He does want to interact with his peers, but he fears being ridiculed because he doesn't speak the language well. He hates this aspect of his personality. Seeing that he's uncomfortable, his classmates apologize for talking so loudly, but neither do they know that the giant is introverted, nor does he imagine that. In fact, they fear him without intending to. He has become a lone wolf. Looking to the side, he sees two boys chatting about trivial things. They are heading to an internet cafe. He remembered his mother saying she used to visit those places to play games. Inside the establishment, there aren't many people. He doesn't even know what to do. Nearby, someone is talking on the phone at a self-service screen. He tries to log in, but just being there makes him anxious. He imagines that he's holding up the line and should probably leave since he's alone. Jaryong mentions that he probably doesn't have an account, and that terminal is for people who already do, so he should head to another one. He asks him to follow him, and the Jaryong shows him how to fill out the essential fields. Once the registration is complete, all he has to do is pay at another machine and choose which computer to use. The giant thanks him, and the young man, Jaryong, says it was nothing. Jaryong looks at the guy and wonders if he might be a foreigner, unfamiliar with this place. However, he just wants Jin to arrive soon since she is running late. If he'd known, he would have come later or stopped by the black market beforehand. He had received a small black object, unsure of what it was. It had been in the chest with the jelly, and he wanted to know what it could be. It was smooth to the touch, but probably wasn't something edible. Since he didn't know what it was, he decided to keep it stored for now. If he needed money, it'd be better to sell the other item, which contained Enkill's blood, one of the three great disasters of the Agar forest in recent decades. Enkill had never been subdued despite many attack teams trying. All they had managed to obtain were a few scales and an insignificant amount of the creature's blood. The government had banned its hunting, and items made with its materials were worth a fortune. He was supposed to meet Jin for lunch and then head to the black market in the evening. But her delay messed up his plans. The foreigner said there were no other seats available and sat down next to the person who had helped him. He told Jaryong he could sit down since he wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. Sitting down, Jaryong logged into the machine. There wasn't any special game, and the computer at his home was much better than the one here. Then, Jaryong noticed something on the screen next to him. He asked if the foreigner played Heroes of Chaos, and the foreigner confirmed it. They were at similar levels, so since the people he usually played with weren't online, he invited Jaryong to team up. They could do ranked matches in a few desolate and abandoned areas called Scars. During the invasion, entire cities were lost. Some had been reclaimed over time, but others, too close to dungeons, were abandoned. These areas now serve as a second line of defense for human refugees. In the last 20 years, nothing like that had ever happened. There had been no cases of monsters leaving the walls voluntarily, thanks to the unit transportation service for them. One guard hated having to do this job, while his friends made money hunting. He resented being a monster chauffeur. Jo Yina, a retired gold-class explorer who had injured her eye, told him that if he hated it so much, he should quit and go back to the field. She wanted to know why he was still there. Sun Changwell, a bronze-class adventurer, mentioned that he was there to make money since he could hardly join any teams anymore. Hearing this hurt as he drove. Something unexpected happened. They had to stop the truck. There was no way the monster had escaped. Stepping out, Yina told her colleague to inform the station that they had stopped to inspect the vehicle. Outside, she prepared to do her job. Inside the cab, her colleague was already relaying the information. He was scared something might happen, but he trusted Yina's skill, so she should be fine soon. He heard the door open and was ready to praise her for a job well done. However, a different woman was there and said that it wasn't much of an accomplishment. Her reflexes were decent for a government employee, but there had to be a reason why she wasn't out in the field. Glancing at the names of the people behind them, she asked the driver why he was still standing there. He should be driving if he didn't want to die soon. Meanwhile, a gaming session between Jaryong and the foreigner was going great, and their food order arrived at the perfect time. Jaryong didn't expect the foreigner to be the same age as him, though the foreigner was much taller and stronger. Jaryong asked which school he went to, but there wasn't time for an answer. Suddenly, they felt something happen. The ground shook. People thought it might be an earthquake, but it almost seemed like something had exploded nearby. This sparked a debate, and soon people began speculating about what it could have been. Maybe the truck had crashed, or the driver was drunk. One person started filming, while another suggested notifying the authorities right away. From the top of a building, a girl commented that it would have been better if the truck had crashed closer to the center. Soon, the area would be swarming with explorers, but she was confident she'd escape in time. However, her superiors were already ordering her to return. The monsters began fleeing from the truck because Yina had woken them up. The people who had gathered out of curiosity were already regretting it. The horrors of the monsters were more numerous, and the more there were, the more dangerous they became. Looking down, Nina estimated there were about 50 people below, but she stayed to watch, thinking at least 100 people would die before help arrived. One curious person was grabbed by the head and brutally killed, while another was paralyzed by fear. The monsters were in a frenzy, with their potential victims standing before them. Then, a bluish glow appeared among the monsters. Jaryong had arrived to take down the creatures. He drove his foot into the face of the first one, and the onlookers were stunned at how easily it was subdued. Jaryong was focused and determined not to let the beasts attack innocent people. He didn't look back at the crowd, ordering them to run immediately. He had dealt with this type of monster before. The ones with a single horn shouldn't be that hard to handle. However, as he thought this, he had to focus again. A motorcycle was coming straight toward him. He barely dodged it and quickly realized who had done it. It could only be a joke, a horn horror with 2 horns. As the beast charged toward him, Jaryong met it with a devastating kick, but the result wasn't what he expected. Jaryong had to step back. The lifespan of these monsters is between 5 and 6 years, and most of them die before they grow a second horn. However, some manage to, about 8% of the total that live longer and can reproduce. Not only is their strength increased, but it's beyond anything considered normal. Even though it's strong and fast, Jaryong knew it was something he couldn't overcome without proper equipment. The beast prepared to attack again, but Jaryong dodged the blow, witnessing the destruction caused by it from a distance. He regained his position to continue the fight. The beast didn't seem satisfied with the destruction it had caused. Jaryong scanned his surroundings and saw a broken stop sign. Thinking quickly, he stomped on the sign, crushing it to extract the pole, which was similar to a staff. The monster charged at him again, furious, emanating its aura. Jaryong braced for impact. Now armed and focused, the beast stomped harder than expected, giving it a huge boost of momentum, and it soared over Jaryong's head. That wasn't what he had anticipated. Now, the beast was close to where several innocent people were gathered. They were completely terrified and unable to do anything to protect themselves. The beast charged at them, ready to make a snack of them. The difference in danger between 2 and 3-star monsters was simply enormous. Both of these monsters were already beyond human capabilities, and normal people had no chance against them. Even an experienced adventurer without proper equipment might struggle. However, there was one exception. The foreigner managed to catch the beast's punch with his bare hand. Determined to fight, he pushed the beast away. This was the exception. Those who had trained their bodies to the limit, becoming monsters themselves. The beast dug its claws into the ground to prevent being pushed further, but the foreigner managed to push it back. He knew, though, that without a weapon, he wouldn't be able to deal any real damage. Something caught his attention. The beast glared menacingly at him from behind. Jaryong, now with his improvised staff, used his techniques to deliver a precise strike to the back of the creature's neck. The foreigner was surprised at the result. The beast fell lifeless with a puncture wound in its back. Jaryong sighed in relief. After the fight, a loud noise drew his attention. The foreigner's curiosity was piqued. Nearby, a powerful explosion had occurred. In just a minute, the beasts had caused all that destruction. The foreigner remarked that it would take a few more minutes before help arrived. A sudden event like this was unexpected, and people were dying while they talked. The foreigner knew how to use a taunting ability. Every tank knows it. He essentially shouted at a high frequency to attract nearby monsters. Determined to become an adventurer, he planned to draw the monsters' attention until help arrived. He told Jaryong to find shelter, as he didn't want to risk him getting hurt, especially since they barely knew each other. However, Jaryong told him to go ahead and use the shout. He imagined the guy must be a tank and knew how to use the skill. But the foreigner said it was dangerous, and Jaryong replied that he was planning to do it alone anyway. If he were alone, he'd consider the possibilities, but he wasn't alone now. He told the foreigner that he was good at games, especially when it came to protecting. Besides, he also wanted to be an adventurer, and if he was going to try, he would give it his best. There was no time for further conversation, it was time to act. The shop was completely destroyed. A person was hiding under the counter behind them, while the monster had just killed an innocent bystander. The tank prepared to use his skill in the store. The beast threw the limp body to the ground and began tearing apart the counter to reach its next victim. At that moment, the tank's shout echoed, its effect reverberating through the area and immediately drawing the monster's attention. The beast stopped its attack, leaving the person it was about to kill confused. The girl responsible for the incident also heard the shout and was intrigued by what might have happened. After using his skill, the tank caught his breath, assuming an offensive stance, ready to fight the monsters that would soon appear. It didn't take long for them to gather at the epicenter of the shout. The strongest of them pointed in the boy's direction, and the one-horned monsters charged toward him. He stood ready, prepared to fight, but then he heard a noise above him. Another monster was approaching from his blind spot. He managed to block the incoming blow, but it wasn't enough to hurt him. With his other hand, he began concentrating his aura and, with a devastating strike, sent the beast flying. However, it wasn't over yet. More monsters were advancing, ready to attack simultaneously. In the distance, the two-horned monster heard the commotion. There was someone else nearby, coming from above. Jaryong descended, landing near the beasts, two of them, each with two horns on their heads. Looking at the crashed truck, he wondered what was going on there. They were gathering the bodies of the dead in the truck, which explained why there weren't so many bodies scattered on the street. Now, the two-horned monsters were moving to attack him. Jaryong waited for them to get a little closer. Fighting up close and without equipment was a tough situation. The odds were low, and it was easier for them to get in each other's way than to help each other. So, he decided to focus on drawing the weaker monsters since he was the tank. Jaryong was now closer, and it was his turn to attack. His task was to take down the strongest one since he was the damage specialist. His improvised staff was ready to strike again. He moved so quickly past the monster that it didn't even realize it had been hit. However, there were several marks on its body where the staff had struck. Compared to a needle, this was much weaker. If Jaryong had his usual staff, things would have been very different. With a staff made of ordinary materials, there wasn't much he could do, but he was doing his best. Even though it wasn't the same, he knew there was a chance. The last time Zeke fought him barehanded, despite a few fast and powerful strikes, none were overwhelming. But those hits slowly wore him down. Now, the monster was in mid-attack, and Jaryong managed to fend it off with rapid strikes. He knew this wouldn't stop the beast's attack, so he dodged the blow. Even the smallest mistake here could cost him his life. He struck again swiftly. This was a unique opportunity. Despite the danger, it was a chance to grow even stronger. He needed to seize the moment and come out victorious with whatever he had at his disposal. Another beast approached, ready to attack. In his mind, he remembered Zeke's evasive movements during their fight, and he managed to emulate similar moves. After his father, this was the first time he had encountered someone as strong. With this experience, he perfected his fourth skill, the Ri of Staff, hitting the monster in front of him multiple times. After being brutally struck, the beast fell to the ground. However, unexpectedly, one of the creatures grabbed his foot, immediately putting him on edge. The monster threw him down, shattering the concrete. Jaryong spat out blood after the violent impact. 2 against 1 was a tricky situation, but he had no choice. This wasn't a fight between humans, so things could be different. Before he could react, the tank arrived, repelling the monster. Luck was also a skill. Watching through the phone camera, 2 people were amazed by the performance. They had defeated dozens of monsters, just the 2 of them, without any equipment. Dong-yoon was thrilled that he managed to record the whole action. But his friend pointed out that he only filmed it because he was too scared to run away. Kim wanted to know who these 2 were, as they looked younger than them. Judging by what they did, they must be gold-level hunters, either students at a warrior school or rookies who hadn't made a name for themselves yet. Either way, he planned to post the video online and asked if his friend could make a thumbnail on his laptop. The news would be out soon, and he didn't want to miss the potential millions of views. Exhausted, the foreigner thought the rescue containment team would have arrived sooner, but only the 2 of them had really been able to resolve the situation. Jaryong apologized for interrupting his cool stance, but he needed help getting up off the ground. They finally shook hands, both worn out. When asked if he was okay, Jaryong replied that he was more inclined to say no. Maybe he had a fracture or 2, but considering what he was expecting, it wasn't so bad. The foreigner was amazed that Jaryong had managed to handle the 2 two-horned monsters. Jaryong returned the compliment, saying his friend had dealt with 9 monsters in total and still helped him with the last ones. But the foreigner pointed out that his were just 2-star monsters. As they were chatting, he asked which school Jaryong went to. Maybe reality was different from what he had heard, as he had heard that schools around here weren't that great. He apologized, saying he didn't mean to speak poorly of Jaryong's school, even though he assumed Jaryong was also from the warrior school. Without answering, Jaryong asked how well-ranked his friend was and how many people there were stronger than him at his school. The foreigner didn't know, as he talked to very few people and, despite taking some tests, wasn't sure if they could properly assess his abilities. He guessed he was probably somewhere in the middle. Now, he was wondering how he was going to help his elf friend. Either way, there was still one last thing to handle. He wanted to know if that monster planned to stay on top of the wagon, doing nothing. It was the only one not drawn by the taunting skill, and there might be something different about it. But he didn't think it was the special one among them. There was a lot of blood around the area, and surely there must be something else inside. That something was what was special. For now, he thought they should just keep watch since they could easily deal with this last monster. A loud noise started coming from the wagon, and it began shaking violently. Suddenly, a hand emerged from the hole in the roof, surprising both boys. The monster was being pulled inside violently. The unit's claws couldn't hold on. Something inside was definitely devouring it. The Horn Horrors live in a society similar to that of a tribal system. Those with 2 horns act as parents and chiefs, leading hordes of no more than 10. These small tribes unite, increasing their numbers and strength. Since they are relatively weak and dungeons are dangerous, these monsters rank low on the food chain, and their numbers are kept in check by predators. However, in rare cases, a mutant can develop a 3rd horn. This mutant is no mere leader of a small tribe, but a king who commands hundreds, even thousands. A Horn Horror King is a beast with a danger level of approximately 5 stars. It didn't take long for him to notice the 2 boys. Immediately, they became alert to what was happening. With a simple movement, the king unleashed a massive and destructive attack. Both of them had to quickly get out of the way, moving at incredible speed. The beast was already near Jaryong, ready to strike. Jaryong had to react quickly to avoid being fatally hit. The monster's hand was powerful enough to destroy his improvised staff. The beast's attack broke through his defense, landing a blow on his stomach. Not stopping there, the king was already preparing to deliver a kick, but his attack was interrupted as Shu Kang caught him in a body lock. The beast's feet dug into the ground, tearing up the pavement. Even as Shu pushed him back, he realized the situation was worsening. The Horn Horror King grabbed him with both hands, lifting him off the ground with no effort. Then he slammed her into the earth, creating a massive crater. If there was one thing they didn't have now, it was time. 2 geniuses, who would eventually grow to reach the full extent of their potential, but in the current situation, maybe they wouldn't if they could use everything they knew. There was a vast gap that couldn't be bridged. Jaryong rose, staggering, yelling at the monster not to do it. With his attention focused on the boy, the king prepared another attack. The red glow of its aura was now upon him. Jaryong took the hit head-on, unable to defend. With that, the beast seemed to have fulfilled its desire to strike. However, it felt something else still happening. A far more dangerous presence than the king was now on the battlefield. Tur had already fallen, and Yu Xiong was still bedridden in the hospital before he disappeared. Not many people knew him anymore, but now the monster was utterly terrified. There was no one in the world who could precisely explain what Yu Xiong had left behind 11 years ago. What had happened since then? A man had made an unexpected confession to the press, admitting all his wrongdoings and begging the public for forgiveness. That event shocked the entire world. 12 hours before the boys engaged in their battle with the monster, Xian had been deep in confusion. The truth she learned on Sunday consumed her thoughts. She spent the next few days researching Zhang's father to determine whether he had been unjustly accused. She was certain that many people coveted the position of someone who was once number 1 but had now lost his powers. What she couldn't understand was how the situation was handled. It started with multiple accusations, the testimony of victims, and the building of a case. Public opinion became divided. But because he was popular, the forged information didn't completely tarnish his image. If it had been her, she would have fought back to the end. But Yu Xiong didn't. Rather than fighting back, he accepted all the accusations made against him. After the press conference, even his supporters turned their backs on him, and Xian became a liar overnight. She didn't understand why he did that. Was there something coercing him? Accepting the charges was like throwing fuel on the fire. She wasn't sure if she was the only one who noticed. But there was something in his facial expressions. Instead of looking guilty, it was as if he was accepting the consequences. Then she came across something even more shocking in his records. There was no mention of him having a family. She wondered if Jaryong wasn't really his son. It made more sense that Jaryong was simply not officially registered, as they did resemble each other somewhat. Maybe Yu Xiong had accepted all the accusations because Jaryong was somehow involved. At that moment, Jaryong didn't even realize what was happening to his body. He looked at his hand and felt something different. The beast charged at him, furious. Its advance was relentless. It knew it needed to finish the boy. In the face of this, there was one thing Jaryong knew for sure: his body could move. His reaction was perfect, landing a strike on the monster's face. He didn't waste a moment. All he needed to know was that he could still fight. Determined, he began striking the monster repeatedly. The pressure was immense, and the monster did everything it could to defend itself, trying to move and escape Jaryong's relentless attacks. Jaryong knew the creature wouldn't get far. Then the beast's counterattack came. Although its aura was powerful, it wasn't fast enough to stop Jaryong from dodging. However, the beast had anticipated this and was now airborne, directly above him. It unleashed another attack, but it was surprised by the outcome. The attack failed to harm the boy. Jaryong retaliated with a violent kick. The force of the impact sent the beast crashing into a nearby building. Though the fight wasn't over yet, Jaryong's strikes exposed a weakness in the creature. A precise strike to the chin with his needle seemed possible, but as the mysterious aura coursing through him vanished, Jaryong felt anxious. The energy was gone. As the beast crawled out of the crater it had made, Jaryong knew he had nothing left to defend against the attack. The beast charged, but suddenly, a truck's container fell directly onto its head. The impact struck the beast but didn't stop it. It charged toward Tur. Utterly enraged, unable to dodge, Tur defended himself as best as he could. The blow was powerful, but as a tank, Tur endured. Despite being far beyond his limits, his resilience bought Jaryong a bit more time. Now ready to deliver his best attack, Jaryong's fist, charged with aura, closed in swiftly. A perfectly executed uppercut connected with the creature's chin. The bris scattered across the area, and the monster's lifeless body lay on the ground. Afterward, it was revealed that a monster transport vehicle had been stolen, leading to dozens of civilian casualties. The rescue team arrived, but the news of the heroic feat by the two boys spread worldwide. Jaryong, injured but alive, opened his eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling. Zeke stood beside him, advising him to focus on healing. There was much to prepare for. As they spoke, Zeke revealed more about Jaryong's father and a dangerous dragon named Duana, the destroyer of worlds. This dragon was the source of the poison that plagued his father and was the most dangerous dragon alive. Dragons, stronger and smarter than any other monsters, were a constant threat. Although the walls built after the invasions had largely kept humans safe, dragons remained a formidable danger. Once order collapsed in the world, they planned to pose as gods in exchange for protection from threats. Jaryong remarked that perhaps they should be thankful the dragons were staying out of things. However, as progress didn't go as planned, the dragons began attacking humans. It was during this time that Jaryong's father appeared. With strategy and determination, he became the explorer who proved that even dragons, as powerful as they are, could be defeated. The news of his dragon slaying spread, and things began to change. Jaryong recalled hearing this story too, but Zeke corrected him. In reality, the dragons didn't hide, they changed their strategy. Dragons are cunning and capable of changing their appearance. Since they couldn't destroy humanity by force, they began infiltrating human society. This information was classified, and Zeke only shared it because Jaryong is Sun's son. Duganoic was the last dragon Sun pursued before falling ill. If he is defeated, an end to Sun's suffering could be achieved. If Jaryong intends to take on this challenge in the future, he needs to grow stronger. Zeke plans to help him kill the dragon. Jaryong is already strong enough to stand up from his bed. Leaning against the window, he examines the card he received and recalls what he had heard. If it didn't seem possible, he should just ignore the idea. But if it was true, he wouldn't miss the chance to help his father. However, Zeke firmly tells him that it's not up to him to decide. To seize this opportunity, he needs to rise to the top. Dragons are cunning and have already infiltrated society, hiding behind facades and waiting for the right moment to act. Even if there is evidence to expose them to the world, without capturing one, there's no point. Acting too soon would make the dragons go back into hiding, causing widespread panic. To prevent this, they need to act precisely and swiftly. Only by doing so can they stop the dragons from escaping again. In recent years, a team has been assembled specifically to deal with Duganoic. All its members are experienced and skilled adventurers capable of subduing a dragon. If Jaryong doesn't become strong enough, no matter how much he wants to join, he won't be accepted by the others. Having someone on the team who might slow them down would jeopardize the operation and put everyone at risk. If all this is true, Jaryong wants to know how much time he has to prepare. He knows they won't wait for him. Zeke explains that they still don't know the dragon's exact location, but they plan to find him in 2 years or less. As Jaryong points out, when the time comes, it won't wait for him. Before leaving, Zeke says he doesn't care what Jaryong thinks of him. If Jaryong never wants to see him again, that's fine. But Zeke makes one promise: whether Jaryong is with them or not, they will hunt down that dragon at all costs. Those words leave a mark on Jaryong's mind. It's a glimmer of hope, a real chance to cure his father. This sudden information is everything he had wanted to hear. The possibility of a cure gives him hope, but it also brings fear that he might not be able to prepare in time for the mission. What he has right now isn't enough, but he resolves to make it, no matter what it takes. For all this time, he had no hope for a cure, and now he has good news. This small spark of hope gives Jaryong a motivation he had never felt before. As he washes his face, he hears the door open. The nurse who enters is happy to see he's awake. She asks if he's in any pain, and he replies that he feels only muscle soreness. The doctor would explain the details, but she tells him he'll feel like that for a few more days. They had to reconstruct his arm almost entirely. When he was rescued, his arm was in critical condition. Every precaution was necessary, or the risk of amputation would have been real. Thanks to a high-level healer, the surgery was a success. Looking at his arm, Jaryong wants to ask the nurse something. He wants to know what happened to his friend who fought alongside him. The nurse reassures him that his friend is doing very well, with an incredible recovery, and had been discharged the same day he arrived at the hospital. Hearing this, Jaryong becomes curious about how long he has been hospitalized. Before he can ask, the nurse requests to take a photo with him. She takes a selfie right then and there. Jaryong then asks if he can be discharged as well. The nurse says he can but warns him that if he leaves through the front door, he'll have problems. The hospital is full of reporters who all want a chance to interview him. Jaryong can't imagine why they are there. The nurse shows him her phone screen, and Jaryong is surprised. The whole situation could have turned into a horrible disaster if it weren't for him and his friend. There would have been hundreds of casualties, if not more. Everyone wants to know who he is, and reporters have been coming to the hospital non-stop. Unfortunately, he had a commitment and was not available. That was unfortunate because he knew there wasn't another day available for this. He said he would make up for her time, but Jin emphasized that it wasn't about money. She needed the appointment because of the warrior school admission exam, and the cancellation could ruin everything. Someone nearby remarked that she looked familiar and wanted to know her name. Among adventurers, there's a saying, the current generation is different from theirs. The first generation paid with blood for progress, and since then, everything has advanced technologically. What also changed were the circumstances of each generation's upbringing. The first generation retired and provided everything for their children. Not just talent, but also a quality education from the earliest moments of childhood. This has led many to wonder who the greatest beneficiaries are. Many would say it's that girl, Han-young. She is a first-year student at the warrior school. Someone wanted to know if he recognized her since she's also the student council president. She decided to skip introductions and revealed that the CEO there was her uncle. He was the reason for the unavoidable commitment. She acknowledged Jin's frustration over the cancelled appointment but suggested a better narrative. Instead of canceling the appointment, he gave his spot to her. She added that she'd appreciate the gesture if Jin could view it that way. Jin, however, was well aware of the influence Han possessed, having heard stories of her capabilities. As the two talked, Jaryong arrived. Jin introduced him as her senior. He thanked Han's uncle but was blunt, asking Han to cut the small talk and leave. She wasn't expecting such a bold response, and her secretary grew visibly nervous. Han smirked, acknowledging the boy's guts, and asked who he was. Jaryong introduced himself, saying he was 17 years old, lived in Gwanek-gu, was 1.80 meters tall, didn't know his current weight, and loved sausage with stir-fried vegetables. He also stated that he was preparing to enter the warrior school. However, he expressed disappointment that even in such a prestigious school, there were arrogant individuals like her. Han's smirk twisted into something sinister. Her hands trembled with rage, but she claimed she didn't exactly hate people like him if they could back up their words. She pointed out that he hadn't even taken the entrance exam but was already acting like a student. Jaryong smirked and countered, asking if this was how she usually treated others. He added that he was curious to see her reaction to what he had to say next. Han's irritation grew, but before she could respond, her uncle called her by name, Han Seong-yu, and demanded to know why she was there without informing him. He reminded her that it had only been a week since her last incident and warned her not to anger her father again. The uncle apologized to Jin and Jaryong, explaining that his niece often acted impulsively. Jin reassured him it wasn't necessary, although she noted that Han was indeed arrogant and only respected strength. Jaryong interrupted, asking Han to come closer. He wanted to know what made her so special, as she didn't seem like an ordinary senior. Jin explained that Han was the student council president, which meant she was the strongest student in the entire school. Students at the warrior school received temporary licenses at the gem rank, allowing them to enter dungeons under supervision. However, student council members are considered professionals, even without official registration. They hold political influence in the school's administration and can join attack teams against high-level monsters. Han, despite being in her second year, had become president after defeating all the council members in her first semester. Jaryong proposed a bet. If he lost, Han could take his time slot. If Han lost, she would have to give up her position as president when he joined the school. Jin tried to stop him, thinking he was insane, but Han found the challenge intriguing and accepted. They moved to a workshop for the match. Jin was anxious, believing Jaryong stood no chance against someone as strong as Han. Jaryong reassured her, saying there was nothing to worry about. As the match began, Han limited herself to using one arm, claiming it was to make things fair. However, she launched a swift and powerful attack that Jaryong barely dodged, surprising everyone watching. The match was more than just about winning. Jaryong wanted to understand the gap between him and someone of Han's caliber. Han's uncle observed that while Jaryong was undeniably talented, his confidence and ability to hold his own against someone like Han were remarkable. As the fight continued, Jaryong's movements reflected his determination not to prove himself but to gauge his own limits and aspirations. Han, on the other hand, was fueled by her immense pride, refusing to let someone like him best her. After several blows, Jaryong gained some distance. Han remarked that since she entered the school, no one had managed to dodge her attacks for so long. She was impressed, especially considering he wasn't in peak physical condition. She noted his injured arm and said he must be far from his full capacity. Jaryong responded confidently, saying she hadn't seen him at full capacity yet and shouldn't assume otherwise. Softening her tone, Han admitted that she had watched a video of him facing the Horn Horror hundreds of times and was a fan of the anonymous hero he had become. Returning to her usual demeanor, she suggested they call it a tie and settle the matter once he joined the school and healed. She didn't want things to end here. However, Jaryong rejected the idea, stating a tie wasn't acceptable since the student council president position was at stake. He was determined to continue the match. Han and the others thought he was bluffing, wasting his best chance at winning. Han, intrigued by his determination, prepared herself. Jaryong, smiling slightly, took a few steps forward and initiated his attack. To everyone's surprise, Han had to focus completely on defending. Even her uncle didn't expect Jaryong's sudden improvement. Jin thought Jaryong had been holding back. But the truth was more profound. He was learning from Han's movements in real time. Han's uncle realized he had underestimated the boy. It wasn't just about strength. Jaryong sought to replicate and master Han's techniques. Despite his physical limitations, he demonstrated remarkable adaptability and learning. This wasn't just about winning or losing, it was about growth. Jaryong's attacks grew more refined, and he performed an advanced technique known as flash twice in a row. Even Han, a skilled practitioner, had yet to master this technique fully. Executing it required not just understanding but perfect timing, reflexes, and flexibility. Despite his injuries, Jaryong displayed a level of skill far beyond his years. Han realized she was in a delicate situation as Jaryong pressed her with unrelenting determination. Contact seemed inevitable, and just as the tension peaked, her uncle intervened, breaking up the fight. Han expressed relief that the fight ended before it escalated further. Despite the outcome, she acknowledged her loss. Jaryong, however, disagreed. He admitted that neither of them had fought to win, and he had broken the rules first by removing his sling. Though he pushed himself to the limit, he recognized that he was the one who crossed the line first. Han's uncle suggested they call it a tie and wait for a formal rematch when Jaryong was fully healed. Han agreed but issued a stern warning to Jaryong. If he failed to enter the school or lost to someone else before losing to her, she would never forgive him. As Han was leaving, Yun approached Jin and asked for her name. Apologizing for the earlier confrontation, Yun admitted that Jin had a good eye for talent. Both Jaryong and Han had enjoyed the fight, seeing it as an invaluable learning experience. Later, as Jaryong and Jin waited on the couch, Jin reflected on the events. She was surprised Han admitted defeat and believed Jaryong had won. However, Jaryong disagreed, citing his rule-breaking and the risks he took during the fight. In his view, neither of them had fought with the intention to win. Instead, the battle had been about learning and growth, a sentiment he deeply valued. Jin wants to know what would have happened if they had fought at full strength for someone who didn't want him to fight. She seems to have gotten too immersed in what she saw. Jin then gets up from the couch, realizing they had arrived in the room. Two people finally enter. It's Han, who says he's grateful they waited all this time. He ended up bringing some pizzas for them to eat. After eating, Han apologizes to them, explaining that his niece caused some trouble and he should have taken them out to eat, but Jaryong is already thankful for the pizzas. For him, food just needs to be plentiful, and that's enough. Adventurers like him can eat 5 times as much food. Jin hadn't thought about that before, but he had been out cold for 4 days without eating anything. Han mentions that his workshop doesn't work with leather, but with a similar material. They use fibers from high-class monsters as raw material to create the strongest and most durable combination for the user. This material is lighter and more resistant than leather. Han already knows which material combination and clothing type would suit Jaryong best. He's seen what Jaryong is capable of and has his personal information. However, there's one more issue Han keeps questioning. The final stage of production involves immersing the material in oil to increase its resistance and durability. Jin already knew this and requested the best material, but obtaining the oil is nearly impossible now. They used oil from the voracious whale of the deep seas, but due to unexpected circumstances, hunting them is no longer an option. Although there are substitutes, using them would breach a contract, an error that shouldn't happen. Han offers to recommend them to a leather master if they want to change their minds and assures that he's willing to cover the loss of time for them. Jaryong says he doesn't mind if the difference in quality isn't significant. He doesn't even use good equipment anyway. And above all, he wants to use the equipment made by Han. He asks if Han was the one who taught his niece. Jaryong doesn't understand much about equipment, but he would feel better knowing it was made by someone strong. Han is grateful for the compliment, even though he retired 10 years ago. Jin is confused by how quickly the food disappeared. Han assures that if they trust him, he will do his best to create the equipment. He's disappointed by the recent failed hunt, which he thought would yield good materials. He asks if they've heard about the imperial wasp and its royal jelly. There's another material from the wasp considered excellent by equipment makers, the black wax, which is used to protect the queen. Only a few can produce this wax, and Han shows a picture of it on his phone, having drawn it after losing his old one. Jaryong is surprised, admitting that he smuggled it but had actually seen it when he visited Jin's house. Rich people really have lots of things, he thinks. Now, Jaryong is in the hospital, and Han asks if he had eaten. Jaryong confirms he has but is happy to eat again if Han helps pay. The door opens slowly to where Jaryong is. He needed to hang up now but asked them to call as soon as they arrived, as his plans for the day just came up. Zeke says it's been a while, and Cho suggests talking outside. 11 days ago, they discussed some things at the hospital. It's not good to make too much noise in Jaryong's room. The team, led by one man, disbanded, and they might just stay quiet. Ewan mentions that Zeke still irritates people easily. These two used to be allies, but not everything is friendly between them. Zeke got too worked up seeing Ewan, who is a retired adventurer and was number 5 before that. Since they're on the same side, Zeke should shut up and follow him. Jin wonders if her friend will keep surprising her like this. She wants to know more about the black wax Jaryong has. She imagines it's the item from the chest, and she should have been informed about it, but Jaryong didn't even know what it was. He thanked her for handling it discreetly. After Arges, nothing has been easy, and now she wants to know if he's busy. Jaryong confirms he is, as he has to meet someone. If it wasn't too far, she could give him a ride. Soon, Jin's phone vibrates. It's her uncle Zeke calling. She asks Jaryong to wait a bit, and he agrees since he won't be late for his appointment. The nights were already getting cold at this time of year. The tailor mentioned this and asked if Jin had already left, but she had just gone to make a call, so she wouldn't be long. The tailor said there was no need to talk to her and just came out to smoke in peace. He mentions that Jaryong's newly learned skill is called Flash, created by his brother Gun's father, who also contributed to its development. Hearing this, Jaryong becomes embarrassed and immediately apologizes. Jaryong should have guessed that the creator of the technique would be there. He apologized for using it without permission, but the tailor wasn't there to complain. There's no exclusivity for this kind of thing. In fact, they hesitate to teach it to just anyone, but it's neither wrong nor a discredit to learn through observation. If a technique is easy to copy, more people will eventually use it, but it's not easy to copy at first. Initially, the tailor thought Jaryong had a weak foundation because he hadn't been formally taught. However, after watching him fight, the tailor realized that if Jaryong had been lazy, he would never have mastered the basic teachings. The tailor doesn't know how Jaryong learned this way, but he offers advice. Jaryong is talented, and with time and dedication, he will discover his true potential. Becoming a great adventurer will be a challenge, but it's a potential that's not far off. However, in this world, prodigies aren't always admired. There will be those who will help him, but there will always be others who, driven by envy, will try to control or destroy him. Jaryong might already be aware of such stories. Jaryong wonders if the advice is to hide his potential to avoid unwanted attention, but the tailor says it's the opposite. He should never hide his talents. It's not something he'd be able to do anyway, and if he tried, it would only attract contempt. He should do what he feels is best, showing the world that he is an unreachable genius. As long as he's capable, he must do his best and absorb as many useful techniques as he can. Even though it might become problematic, he shouldn't bow down as he just did. Instead, he should raise his head and voice. The strongest decide what's right or wrong. If he learns and perfects a technique, he can claim it as his own. The tailor understands how Jaryong must be feeling, but in the world of explorers, strength rules. The tailor's niece is an extreme example of this, but he doesn't plan on curbing her behavior. She's demanding, and even if she's like that, no one will ever underestimate her. He thinks Jaryong should do the same. At that moment, Jin appears, calling after her friend. She didn't expect the tailor to be here, but she wanted him to speak with her uncle. She emphasized that he should, though she didn't know why. She also knew the tailor would be there and asked if the boy was around, saying she wanted to talk to him. Jin picks up the phone, and Zeke apologizes if she was in the middle of something, but a problem arose, and he needed to see her immediately. Jaryong didn't expect the sudden invitation, but he understood and said he would meet Zeke right away. They follow a secret route leading to a dungeon through the subway. Zeke is already there, his clothes torn. He says that someone is inside and that he hadn't intended to call Jaryong, but the person said they'd rather die than be healed by him, which is why Zeke called. It's clear that Zeke and the manager had a falling out. The guy with Zeke says that if he had known Jaryong would arrive so quickly, he would have asked for a shirt. Jaryong doesn't know who he is but is intrigued when the guy asks if Jaryong was the one who cut Zeke's cheek. The guy notes that Jaryong is already famous within the attack group as the boy who defeated a high-ranking monster. The captain is excited to meet him, but Zeke cuts off the small talk, saying it's time to leave and there's no point in staying. Jin goes with them but asks Zeke to call her later. On the other side of the door, there's a reddish light. Jaryong heads there to see what happened. Frustrated, Jaryong thinks that the man truly needed help. His body and pride are shattered, and he doesn't understand why the man came all the way there. The man asks Jaryong if he has a lighter, but Jaryong just wants to know what that strange light is since the sun has already set. When Jaryong doesn't have a lighter, the man asks if he can hand him something as he's too tired to move. Below them, there is fire and destruction everywhere. Jaryong now wants to know what the two had been fighting about. It wasn't really a fight. The man just wounded Zeke until there was nothing left of him. The guy who came with Zeke is impressive, not a tank, but with good defense and potential to be a big deal in the future if he trains for another 10 years. Jaryong says he has something to tell the manager. He already knows that if Jaryong wants to quit being a smuggler, he's free to go. But if Jaryong wants to become an adventurer, there's one condition: he better learn within the next month. The manager plans to teach him, but if Jaryong doesn't succeed, he should reconsider his plans. It won't be easy, as it's not within Jaryong's natural talents, but Jaryong isn't sure what it could be. The manager reveals that it's exactly what he thinks: magic. He intends to teach Jaryong magic. Thanks for watching till this long, my fellow men of culture, and subscribe to the channel for more content.